Well, hello, everybody. I am Paul Brody. I am the global blockchain leader for EY, and I am here today with my colleague, Jimmy Ong in Singapore. I'm in San Francisco, as you can tell by our topical and specifically localized backgrounds. Hey, Jimmy, how are you doing?
Hi, good morning, good evening, Paul. Really good to see you here. My name is Jimmy Ong, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
I
And
really can't.
really
Go
nice
ahead. Sorry,
shirt,
Jimmy.
Paul, I gotta say.
I've got four shirts lined up for today, so we're gonna try to change through them. And I prepared. There was a comment on Reddit that
Sure.
people would like to see more than one shirt from me. And I'll be honest with you, I'm afraid of the Reddit guys, right? They want four shirts, they're going to get four shirts. They ask for 40 shirts, they will get 40 shirts. We know how the power has shifted. I also closed out any short positions I had prior to today's summit, since we have a number of folks attending from Reddit. So
I am looking forward then to the rest of your shirts that are coming up as well. Really, really nice. Just to set expectations, this is the only shirt I have in the office. This is the jacket. I can change to a dark black jacket after this, but I don't think it's going to make a difference. We will focus on your shirt and we will look forward to the rest of your t-shirts as well, Paul.
fantastic. Now, we've got a really amazing lineup of content for today. In fact, John, why don't you put up the agenda for today's summit? We'll take just a moment to go through that agenda. All right, so we've got an incredible agenda. Jimmy, you want to? So I'm going to start. I'm going to start out on the agenda, and I'm going to give kind of a typical kind of keynote, lay out a little bit of EY's vision, and then we're going to move on to a technology showcase. My colleague Lin Mao, who is our CTO in mainland China, is going to lead that, and we have two fantastic guests for
Yes,
that. Yeah, Jimmy, you want to tell us who our guests are?
I think we are very happy to have Jun Long from WeBank to join us today, as well as Ifan, CEO of BSN as well. So they are going to join Lin in the technology showcase, and we're going to talk a little bit about OpsChain, how interoperability will work on China's new blockchain infrastructure. So that's going to be an exciting time, and that will start at 9:35 to 9:55 a.m. Singapore time.
Excellent. And then after that, we're going to have a break with some commentary. We have got JT Nickel and David Hoffman from the Ethereum Finance Forum on Reddit and the Bankless newsletter, who are going to be joining us throughout the day for the commentary. And then we're going to go into our solution showcase. In particular, we're going to dive into EY OpsChain Public Finance Manager with my colleague Didi from EY Japan. And then after that, I think we've got a panel discussion, right, Jimmy?
That's right. So I'm going to be moderating a panel discussion, and this is an exciting one. We're going to discuss about baseline protocol. It's back to the topic of trust. How do we use the protocol to build trust in what some people will say is a trustless environment? So I'm going to have with me three panelists. We have Charles from Consensus. He's the Director of Strategic Initiatives. Vito from Microsoft will be joining us as well. He's a senior solution architect with applications innovations. And finally, Victor Poo as well, who is EY's very own blockchain technical architect out from the APAC here as well.
Great. We'll have another break with some more commentary, and then we'll get into the second phase of our session, which is going to be diving somewhat deeper into assurance and financial services. And we're going to have our colleague David Bird, who is our global kind of chief blockchain assurance and audit expert, who's going to lead off that discussion. And then I think after that we have another panel. Is that right, Jimmy?
You are right. The next panel is going to be on digital assets. Is going to be covered again a group of panelists from the industry. We have the CFO of Binance Global with us as well. Daniel from DBS in Singapore, he's the head of digital exchange, will be joining us, and we have Mark Whiteman, EY's ASEAN industry leader and APAC consulting leader, with us at the panel as well. David is going to be moderating the panel, and I am looking forward to that as well. Following that, we have a thought leadership series that's going to be hosted by Scott Waller and Sing Yi. Scott is our Oceania blockchain leader, while Xing Yi leads our Oceania blockchain assurance. So they're going to talk about managing risk in enterprise blockchain projects and how it will grow customers and network. So, and we will have a final wrap up after that, Paul.
Excellent. So that's it for the agenda. If you want to take the agenda page down, then John, I am going to go into my presentation. We're already, thank you, Jimmy. We're already on the second T-shirt here, Four Seasons Landscaping in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so we'll get ready to move on. So we're going to go into the keynote presentation here. I'm going to fire up the sharing component. And here we go. All right. Just put that in the right place so I can see what I'm doing here. All right. I'm Paul Brody. I'm the global blockchain leader at EY. I first of all want to thank everybody for just joining us and tuning in and for caring about what we have to say, which is more than I can say for my 2 children. But the main topic we're here to talk about is what I am calling for this year, the ecosystem era. So for the last 5 years at EY, we've been kind of delivering the same somewhat boring messages that we believe that public blockchains are going to do for business ecosystems what ERP did inside the enterprise. Now, most people are not deeply familiar with what ERP did inside the enterprise, but the answer is it had a colossal impact over a period of 40 or 50 years. It had a huge driver on productivity. It organized companies internally in a way that simply was not possible before. It made business process scalable because you didn't have to know the person down the road or around the world in order to execute the same business process with the same facts. But all that sophistication tended to come to a halt at the boundary of the enterprise. And we believe blockchain will be the tool for building trusted business process transformation across enterprise boundaries. Now, we've been saying this for several years, but I really believe we will look back upon 2020 as something of a substantial breakthrough year in a bunch of different dimensions. And I think especially if we are talking about Asia Pacific, we will look back upon 2020 as a milestone because of the launch in China of DCEP, digital currency electronic payment. The world's first and really what will probably surely be the world's largest blockchain-like tokenized digital currency. Now, DCEP isn't a blockchain. And it is not an enterprise transaction product at the moment, but it is a milestone in terms of governments and consumers accepting and using blockchain technology or tokenization and digital assets in their daily lives. And it will spread to the rest of the world, I believe, in very substantial ways. Maybe not through central bank digital currencies in many cases, but through certainly stable coins and regulated financial instruments like that. Secondly, enterprise asset allocations, right? We have entered the era where enterprises routinely decide to buy digital assets. First and foremost, that's going to be Bitcoin. It has been Bitcoin. We've seen that quite a bit, but it will move quickly beyond Bitcoin. And digital assets of the kind that you can buy on blockchains will be a routine way that enterprises and financial entities and pension funds allocate some of their funds. It came out a couple of weeks ago that some of the world's most conservative and careful investors, which are the Ivy League universities, their endowments in the US, like Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, have been investing in digital assets. It's just going to be routine in a way that has not been before. In Europe, both in Europe and in Switzerland, there are regulatory frameworks that are taking hold, and they are providing not just clarity from enforcement actions, but also positive clarity about what's allowable and doable. And I believe it will usher in an expansion of financial services in digital assets that are available. And very importantly, those digital assets, those assets that are coming from traditional systems, from new types of assets, they are going to be fed into this exploding DeFi ecosystem. And then finally, I think for me, one of the really big things is we are converging on an era of public blockchains. Really, we are converging on, especially in many parts of the world, on the public Ethereum blockchain as a global industry infrastructure. And we've seen that really emphasized in the last couple of weeks as other kind of blockchains or competitors or alternatives have chosen to exit this business, or they are ramping down their investment, or their chief executives in terms of technology are moving on. It's because Ethereum has really become the dominant digital ecosystem, and that provides a level of simplicity and clarity when thinking about your options that has not been around in the past. So 2020 was a pivotal year, and as we head into 2021, I believe we are at this inflection point of very significant ramp up, right? By any measure, and there are so many measures, I could spend like half an hour taking you through all of them, but by almost any measure, the real world adoptions of blockchain technology are very strong. It's not just the price of crypto assets, it's the amount of venture funding. Last year was a record. So 2020, we have the data from 2019, which was down a bit. 2020, we have some preliminary data. We know it was probably the largest year in history, not just for venture capital investment, but specifically for blockchain related investment. DeFi capital just kind of exploded. I made this chart for some of our summits last year. It looked like an exponential curve, and that continued straight on. Ethereum addresses, fees, government adoption, by any real world measure, not just crypto prices, right? Blockchain technology really moved forward last year and moved from what I would call an interest of 10, 20, 30 very smart, educated, technically sophisticated people to something that hundreds of millions of users are working on a daily basis. In terms of the enterprise adoption space, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is it is incredibly robust. We went through a period, especially a couple of years ago, where we went through a difficult transition. What we saw over and over again was that large enterprises discovered that private blockchains don't scale very well. It's hard to build your own network. It's hard to persuade your suppliers to come on board, but they didn't feel like public blockchains were ready. And so we saw this dip in private blockchain engagement. But what's been very exciting for the last year or so is that our blockchain business on the enterprise side is actually growing really fast. And it's growing very fast, and it's growing fastest on the public blockchain side of the business. We have made a breakthrough in terms of enterprises being ready to run serious business processes around traceability, contract management, and procurement on the public blockchain side of the equation. And if you misinterpreted, or if you read some of the stories about companies quitting the blockchain business, the wrong interpretation is that the enterprise blockchain market isn't good. The right interpretation is that if you are on public blockchains, as we are, and are focused in that environment, we are seeing an incredible growth in this business. We are hiring people. We're struggling to keep up with the pace of how this industry is growing. And I deliberately did not update this chart from our data last year. We will have a global summit in May of this year, and we will have new data at that time in terms of the ramp up in the business. But I can tell you it's been very, very strong. So what are the big forces that are going to drive the world and blockchain in 2020, and in particular in the region Asia Pacific? Number one, China's blockchain acceleration. It is not just a China phenomenon. It is going to have an impact across the region. Number two, programmable blockchain applications. This is plain English for DeFi. And I like to talk about DeFi in plain English because although those of us who are in blockchain are excited about DeFi and we're thrilled about DeFi, I think many people still wonder, what's the point? And the answer is it's incredibly valuable. There is a tremendous point to it, but it starts by explaining what it means in plain English. And then finally, let's talk about enterprise digital transformation, because 2020 put all kinds of digital transformation into overdrive. I saw an amazing chart from Benedict Evans, who's a brilliant industry analyst. He showed that in the space of 2020, many parts of, say, the consumer retail industry grew by a factor of 10 compared to typical other years. So we did 10 years of digital transformation, the digital shift to online buying and other transactions in just 1 year, right? It was no different, I think, in many other enterprises in terms of how they started thinking about the back end of their operations as well. So let's talk about DCEP. Even before China launched DCEP, China was already becoming one of the big leaders in the blockchain business around the world. We counted thousands and thousands, we lost count, of blockchain companies, more than 1,000 actual startups, lots of major companies. We are very pleased to have leaders from two of the most important with us later today. But it would be a mistake to think that what's happening in China only affects China. And it will, in fact, affect the entire world, right? China is the world's largest exporter. They are the world's largest economy. And if you just look at some of the data about China's impact in the region, exports, imports, FDI, China is now the world's #1 destination for foreign direct investment. So we believe that digital payments, blockchain-based transactions, smart contracts are going to be how China connects its business infrastructure with the rest of the world. And I want to talk about that today because we are very, very focused on that. We believe not only is there a huge market and tremendous opportunity in China itself, but there's an enormously large opportunity for digitally integrating Chinese companies and our clients and other enterprises with global business partners. Right? And to that effect, right, I think an engine of that will be the rollout of DCEP, right? It today exists in kind of 3 different segments. There's the consumer payments existence, the era that's in China now that's getting rolled out rapidly. There are, secondly, a large number of blockchains within China that are enterprise blockchains, just like you see in other parts of the world that are private enterprise blockchains, although there's much more interconnection between those blockchains in China, and the regulatory environment is moving towards regulating blockchains as common carrier services, which means they have to be interconnected and they have to be compatible. And then you have connectivity to the rest of the world with Ethereum, the public Ethereum ecosystem, which is where so much of the world is doing business and building a decentralized business infrastructure. We foresee a future where these start to get connected. First, digital payments gets integrated across blockchain infrastructure within China. And then secondly, we believe there's a critical role for interconnection from mainland Chinese domestic blockchain ecosystems into the global blockchain infrastructure that's led and really dominated by the Ethereum ecosystem. Because we believe that, we are taking action around that. And I'm really pleased to talk about 3 big steps forward that we are officially announcing today. There will be an official EY press release in a couple of days, but you heard it here first. Number 1, EY has joined the FISCO consortium, the Financial Blockchain Shenzhen Consortium, and we will be building, we have built, and we will be deploying the EY OpsChain and blockchain analyzer solutions on the FISCO BCOS standard in China. So that's the first really important step forward for us, is we will be offering our core products and services on one of the biggest open source blockchain platforms in China. Secondly, we will be working with the blockchain-based service network, BSN. We'll be working with BSN over the coming year, not only to deliver our services on the FISCO BCOS platform, but very importantly, to deliver the OpsChain and blockchain analyzer services on the Ethereum infrastructure in China. And we'll be working with BSN to do a couple of things. First of all, to deliver on Ethereum, a permissioned Ethereum offering that will be delivered in mainland China. And then secondly, on a public permissioned version that will bring an access controlled version of the global public Ethereum blockchain into mainland China. And additionally, we have localized blockchain.ey.com, which is our global blockchain infrastructure. That's now going to be available at blockchain.ey.com.cn. If you're using blockchain.ey.com in the US and the rest of the world, you can already go and switch your user interface and the language requirement to Chinese. We will support Chinese infrastructure. We will support Chinese language. We will support Chinese blockchain standards. And we'll be showing, I think Lynn is going to show later on, we can support deployments on FISCO BCOS already. We can build multiple keys, both public Ethereum and FISCO BCOS, and run them in the same kind of server environment for our clients. So this is a measure of our very intense commitment, not just to the market in China, but to the Asia Pacific market, and then connectivity between the rest of the world and Chinese companies. So I'm very proud of the progress that we've made. I am incredibly proud of what Lin Mao is going to show you and the conversation, and our guests, Yifan He, who is the CEO of BSN, and Junling Lin, who is the strategy leader from WeBank. So those are incredibly important. I should, of course, always caveat that our services will be available in China based on regulatory approval. So we don't always know exactly how long that will take. Secondly, DeFi. DeFi is really a very logical extension of the promise of smart contracts, right? And as I like to say, doing stuff is a technical term for business process execution. If we go back to the early days, and by early days, I mean like 9 months ago, before DeFi exploded, if you said smart contract, the truth is that most smart contracts just kind of did some very basic stuff. They weren't smart. They didn't execute things automatically. And what's great about DeFi is it is a very reasonable, logical execution of smart contracts. If I have an asset, I should be able to write a contract, a deposit contract that pays you interest. That's actually pretty straightforward. And I should be able to write another contract on top of that that says, find me the best interest rate, or loan out this asset, right? It's just the application of business process automation into digital assets. Now, what is exciting about this is that we are in the process basically of recreating the entire traditional set of banking services, deposits, payments, loans, liquidity services, risk management, all types of capabilities are being recreated, but they're being recreated in a fundamentally new way. So it's not about taking stuff that previously existed and just copying it into the blockchain ecosystem. It's about building a vastly more flexible, much more genuinely open digital infrastructure. And what is today very, very immature from a technical standpoint, right? We had last year, we counted it out, I think something like 15 hacks, $50 million, something in that range. I'm forgetting the exact number. There are still contracts that are being deployed without proper security testing. It doesn't have privacy. It doesn't have all the regulatory compliance tools that enterprise need. But what we see is both incredibly immature in some areas and amazingly sophisticated in others. And what we will see over the coming year is this incredible maturing of DeFi. And what I hope to see by the end of 2021 is enterprise ready, regulatory compliant, privacy enabled, decentralized financial services that are ready to run on the assets that businesses generate. And so that means purchase orders, invoices, inventory, assets in transit. And the idea is very simple. Companies already get financing for all of these services, but they can't get it easily. With DeFi, you ought to be able to take a purchase order with sort of blockchain ready, regulatory compliant, privacy based DeFi. You should be able to take a purchase order from your customer and immediately get working capital. And you should be able to take an invoice that you've sent your supplier or your customer, and you should be able to get that factored or paid instantly. And we want to see that standardized, mobilized, and create this incredibly powerful marketplace for enterprise assets. So that is what I'm perhaps one of the most things I'm excited about in the coming year is this deep integration of financial services and process automation that I hope we'll see around DeFi. And then finally, enterprise digital transformation. It goes hand in hand with DeFi and everything else, but it is the culmination of a lot of activity that's gone on. For a couple of decades, we've gotten more and more sophisticated inside the enterprise. But the minute you leave the enterprise, our machine learning ERP system with planning and scheduling goes back to, let me send you a PDF and you can scan it into your system, right? We lose so much maturity when we try to cross enterprise boundaries. And what I want to see, and what I believe we will see, is blockchain restoring that. When you use blockchain, you'll be able to have multiple parties, shared data, and shared business logic on the public blockchain with privacy, and you will be able to see your inventory in the channel as well explained, as well visible as you used to be able to see your own. So we've said this before, I want to repeat it because it's so important. We believe this is what blockchains will really do in the enterprise. They will build business ecosystems that are as rich and as powerful as ERP systems are within the enterprise. They will not replace ERP, but they will hugely expand the scope and capability of this ecosystem. We've prioritized 3 big solutions that we're going to be talking a lot about. Number 1, financial services, right? This is kind of the engine of a lot of what we're doing. Number 2, physical and digital supply chains, right? Supply chains are amazing because when you tokenize stuff, right, you can track it on the supply chain, and it's ideal for blockchains. And then finally, public service administration, right? We are seeing an incredible era of public spending, right? Accountability is something that accountability and transparency are things that blockchain can deliver. In the world of financial services, we are making an especially large investment. Obviously, financial statement audit is a big priority for us. We have more than 230 audit clients. We have our blockchain analyzer, which is a core tool in 95 countries. I'm especially proud of our smart contract testing. It is live at blockchain.ey.com. You can, even without a subscription or a fee, you can use it for free to test ERC20 tokens. And we have a new beta, it's an alpha service for very advanced testing and simulation. Blockchain visualization, we have a Bitcoin Explorer that's live. It's free of charge for end users if you want to try it out. It was designed for our forensics team. They use it in investigations. And we will also soon have an Ethereum one as well. And finally, we have the tax calculation tools. So we're really excited about the focus we have on financial services, which is such a huge engine of this business. When it comes to public service administration, right, again, a big focus for us, we have a product that's called Public Finance Manager. My colleague Didi is going to be talking about it later, but in a nutshell, it's all about helping taxpayers get rapid and clear accountability for their investments, right? Governments apply money for budgets and services, whether it's education or healthcare, right? That money goes through many layers. It goes into programs, it goes to institutions, it goes into projects. And what PFM does is it allows you to understand both the flow of money using tokenization and the flow of results, and to get much clearer, much faster visibility into how we are performing. That's already being used by the City of Toronto, and we have more than, I think, a dozen other state, local, federal, national governments, multinational entities that are in the process of either deploying it or evaluating it. And then finally, let me talk about one of my personal favorites, which is supply chain management. Fundamentally, tokenization is a perfect way to think about managing assets and inventory. So if you think about kind of a traditional physical supply chain, and it's very similar, by the way, in a digital one as well, in a traditional physical supply chain, it's very easy to represent the raw materials, the products, the inputs and outputs as digital tokens, to track them from start to finish, whether you're talking about food or wine or mozzarella or vaccines, all things that we are doing at EY, and to tie all those business process steps along the way with smart contracts, and eventually to integrate into all of those things blockchain-based digital financial services through DeFi. So we're very proud of the progress we've made. We achieved recently a great milestone with Microsoft. We've connected up their 100th business partner to the Xbox video game network. And we've got 99% improvement in cycle time. I'm told that's pretty good. 40% reduction in cost we expect when we're fully deployed. We are really pioneering some cool stuff with Microsoft. We have an automated tool that scans in paper contracts and uses machine learning to extract the key terms. We are doing direct entry on the financial system for things like revenue recognition, right? So we use Microsoft and we work with Microsoft as the bleeding edge client. And we actually take some of the best stuff in our work from Microsoft and we migrate it into our public infrastructure. And it has had really huge improvements in terms of trust and transparency in the ecosystem. We could not have a better client and partner than Microsoft for such a bleeding edge project. So we are building our industrialized and scalable platform. I'm incredibly proud of the progress we've made in the last year. Blockchain.ey.com and blockchain.ey.com.cn is kind of a one-stop shop for managing your access into the blockchain. It's built on a set of shared foundational services. And on top of that, we're building our applications, both Blockchain Analyzer and EY OpsChain. And by the end of this year, we will have completed the migration of all of our business applications into this environment. And from this environment, we not only can deliver API integration to ERP systems and to our clients, but we also have direct integration to public Ethereum, private Ethereum, Quorum, Bitcoin, and as of today, we have announced it, FISCO BCOS, and Ethereum in China built around BSN. Our end state vision is pretty simple, and I love recycling the slide because it's been true for years. I believe fundamentally, nearly all business processes between enterprises and across enterprises can pretty much be boiled down to, I've got money, you've got stuff, and we're going to exchange those under the terms and conditions of a business agreement. Well, the money and the stuff can both be described as tokens, right? They either represent money, they represent assets, they can be real, they can be virtual, doesn't matter. And the process, the contract, is a smart contract, which is a mixture of both a legal agreement and a business process. And when you combine those two together, I fundamentally believe there's no business process between enterprises we cannot migrate onto the blockchain. And when you add in analytics, you can not only do the process, but you can understand how it went. So we, however, are aiming for something larger than business process automation. I've written about this and I've talked about this, but for me, when I think about how technology evolves, we know that the first thing companies do is, and it's just like my kids, right? They get the box, right? They open up the Lego box and they assemble the Legos into the picture that's on the box. That's the first thing we do. What companies do is we get a new technology toy, and the first thing that we do is we go and replicate our procurement and supply chain and infrastructure processes. But that is only the first step. Inevitably, the next phase is we disassemble the stuff and we take the Lego blocks and we start making new stuff. And I believe this is where it gets exciting over the next few years, right? We are aiming to make something that is bigger and more transformational than we've ever really thought about before. And the truth is, we rarely deeply understand the steps that lead from one or two incremental innovations to something that seems completely unrecognizable. I don't think anybody would have expected that today in 2021, companies would be building online kitchens that are restaurants that only deliver through food sharing, ride sharing apps. And yet somehow we got there from online credit cards, GPS, and mobile phones, right? All of those pieces led from one to the other. And if you think about it, we are creating these Lego pieces, right? So if you think about a business operation, buy raw materials, make stuff, move it, store it, sell it. DeFi, we are starting to understand, right? Purchase orders, working capital, insurance, those are all kind of Lego blocks that we can have. But why stop at DeFi? Why shouldn't we have decentralized services with decentralized systems, procurement systems, operation systems, logistics systems? We are building some of those systems. And if I have DeFi, decentralized finance, and I have DeSys, decentralized service systems, I should also have DOps, right? It doesn't have to stop at the online world. If you have inventory space, if you have warehouse, if you have air freight, if you have physical services, those can be tokenized and deployed and contracted through the blockchain. And so I believe we are going to be able to take all of these pieces of traditional business operations and disassemble them and then reassemble them. And when we do that, we will end up in 5 to 10 years with business models that we can hardly predict and recognize. So this is the beginning of a very exciting year. I'm very excited. So it's going to take a while though, and I do want to set realistic expectations. And I love to also come back to this because I'm a huge history buff. I believe, we tend to repeat ourselves. Maybe not exactly, as Mark Twain says, it doesn't repeat itself exactly, it rhymes. but we do tend to repeat ourselves. And if we go back to 2006, that's when AWS was launched. Amazon, I believe, kind of brought us to the tipping point of cloud infrastructure. It took a little bit more than a decade to get from Amazon's launch to the majority. And by majority, I don't mean 95%, I mean like 51%. So it took about 10 years to get to the halfway point where more than half of new business applications were deployed on the public cloud. Well, it'll take about that long, but I stick to my prediction. 10 years from now, more than half of all new business contracts will be deployed on the public Ethereum blockchain. And many of them will be the kinds of business contracts that we never really expected or knew before. So with that, I'm going to wrap up for my talk. It's been a delight. I'm honored to be invited. I'm going to have to candidly admit, oops, I just switched my camera off. I'm going to have to candidly admit, I can't wait to get back on an airplane and eat airplane food and go to China and Singapore. But in the meantime, this is the best I'm going to get. So with that, thank you so much. We have incredible next group of speakers, Lin Mao, our CTO in China, Yifan He, the CEO of BSN, and Junlong Lin, who is the strategy leader for WeBank. So over to you, Lin.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Good morning. And this is Lin from EY China. Greetings from Shanghai. So together with me, I have Yifan He, who is the CEO of FredDate and the Executive Director of BSN Development Association. Greetings from Beijing, as well as Junlong Lin, who's from WeBank, the core entity that's supporting the development of the FISCO community, as well as the blockchain business strategic cooperation leader from WeBank. Thanks for joining, Yifan and Junlong. So really, before we talk about why we support our product and showing you our actual product, I want to a little bit touch base upon the blockchain development in China. So we've seen that China has been prioritizing the technology as the new infrastructure and taking really strategic moves for prioritizing technology. And we can see that, like the BSN initiatives, we've been seeing really great progress of the mass adoption of this technology. And by the DCEP and a lot of standardization, this becomes a technology that's more accessible to the wider community and wider users. And also from the supplier and demand side of the market, we can see big techs like the Tencent and WeBank, our colleagues. It's been really great investment and kind of nurtured a great ecosystem where we have like the China's best ecosystem, such as the FISCO BCOS, and supporting all the middleware's implementations for promoting this technology. And from the demand side, we see a surge of the needs in all kinds of industries, a lot of real cases that has been in production, as well as looking forward, really many decision makers like the executive leaders, the C-suites, all betting on this technology and try to prioritize this as their top of their emerging tech options. So this is why we're inviting these two very important speakers from BSN as well as the FISCO BCOS. And up to you, Yifan, could you explain where you're from and what you're working and what are the exciting developments ever since that what we're looking at from the BSN part?
Okay, thank you, Lin. My name is Yifan He, and I'm the CEO and founder of FredDate Technology, one of the founding members of BSN in China. And basically, why we build the BSN is we want to really bring the blockchain technology to the general public, okay, to the individual and the small and medium companies. Everybody can use blockchain technology and test the technology, just like the early internet. So when the cost become lower and reach more and more people, the innovation will begin. So that's actually the main point of the BSN. And 3 days ago, we launched a major quarterly update of BSN, and we added the consensus token as a permission framework, and we launched 2 open permission chain. So after this update, actually the major component of BSN from original design actually all in place. So basically, if you want to build your own private chain, come to BSN and through our standard permission framework, you can build as many private chain as you want. And if you want to access public chain, come to BSN and you can access 15 public chains through one gateway with one simple monthly payment. And by end of this year, the number will become 30. Okay. And if you want to access public chain, but you don't want to pay with cryptocurrency, then you can use our open permission chain. You can pay the gas fee with fiat money. And also we have the both services we call the inter-chain communications hub. No matter it's a private chain you build or public chain or the open permission chain, all the chains will become interoperable inside the BSN environment. So that's but the main purpose of BSN still two. The first one is bring down the cost. Okay, that's always the number one reason. When the cost to use this technology become as close as to zero, then this technology will really become the mainstream of technology. And the second one is the interoperability, because we consider all the chains right now is the internet, in the early internet. Okay, they don't really talk to each other. And why internet becomes so powerful? Because the data mixed together. Okay, for example, for e-commerce, you need the data from payment, you need data from merchandise, you need the payment from retail, you need the data, and you mix them together, you create the e-commerce, the business model. So that's why connecting all the chains and let the data flow freely is very important for the blockchain industry. So that's basically the BSN, and I'm very honored to be here. And I'm very honored, after 3 months testing from EY finally, recognize BSN as a platform you can work with. And also, I want to thank the EY team. They gave us a lot of advice. Also help us to make our gateway APIs even better. So it's that's the team we work with. Thank you.
Thanks, Yifan. I think the BSN initiative also tried to lower the barrier of the entry into the blockchain world and helps to facilitate adoption, right? And next, I have Junlong. So the floor is yours, Junlong. Would you share us what the FISCO has been done and what are the exciting stuff?
Okay. I will share my screen to all of you and we can start.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Junlong from WeBank Blockchain Department, and now I'm focused on the FISCO BCOS blockchain development and the FISCO BCOS partner ecosystem construction. And today, thank you very much for EY's invitation and to let us to join this sharing, and we can share some of our FISCO BCOS blockchain to all of you. Firstly, let me introduce the WeBank. WeBank is the first digital bank in China, and also is the first 100% private bank in China. And WeBank is founded by Tencent Group, and the Tencent Group owns 30% shares for WeBank. And also as the first digital bank in China, and the WeBank have over 46% IT staff in this bank. This is the biggest difference compared with other traditional Chinese bank. And also, we offer 24 hours and 7 days operation, or online service, financial service. We don't have any offline service compared with other traditional bank, and this is our biggest difference. And also, WeBank focus on the ABCD fintech. We want to develop the ABCD fintech. The A we means artificial intelligence. AI, and B is blockchain is also very important for our financial system technologies. And the C is cloud computing, and D is big data. We want to use ABCD fintech to improve our working efficiency and user experience and our client numbers. Also, we use ABCD to reduce our financial cost and all our financial risk in our totally banking systems. So, we start to exploring and practicing our blockchain start from 2015 and 2016. We need to build the FISCO consortium, this FISCO consortium by WeBank. And since 2017, we start to decide to open our FISCO BCOS platform to public. And since 2017, we built our fintech, regtech, and legal tech solution for business based on all of FISCO BCOS. And also, until now, we can say the FISCO BCOS this consortium is the largest open source blockchain community in China. And also, EY is the most important members in our this FISCO consortium, and to help us to open our this platform to the public. And also BSN is our very important partner in this community. So we want to say the FISCO because it's a pioneering blockchain platform in China until now. And so we have 6 advantages. First one is legal structure, and we can support various plugins, modules for quickly development from blockchain layer to the UI layer. Also, we have high performance. We can handle over 20,000 TPS with a single chain setup, and also easy to use. Since 2017, we decided to open this platform to the public, and we also opened over 200,000 words documentation to the public, and so all the public can easy to read and to learn how to use our FISCO because this platform, and also security, and we can support comprehensive cryptographic and different. Also, we have privacy protection technology and inside this FISCO because. Also, we have diversified use cases in FISCO because systems, and also we totally allowed regulator to join as observer node for the monitoring and to see how we run these FISCO because the blockchain system. So you can see since 2017 we start to want to build the infrastructure, middleware, and the solutions layer framework for the FISCO because. You can see in the bottom, this is the FISCO because platform, and in the middle, we start to do some research about the middleware like the WeID, WeDPR for the data privacy, and WeBase, WeClose for the close chain, and WeEvent, WeSign, and so forth. And on the top of that, we have to do some research in the different industries and to offer a different solution to the different customer or different industry customers, like a supply chain, smart retail, the copyright, or smart city, and so forth. So you can see, this is the last one. This is our all application scenarios map. Until now, we have already have over 120 applications cases running in the production systems. And also some of our clients is talking to us is say, you are a WeBank is a bank, and also FISCO because it's a financial industries. So maybe you will only focus on a financial service and financial scenarios for the blockchain, but no, since 2015 on the 2017, we start to develop our scenario to different industries, including the government affairs, healthcare, copyright, education, smart manufacturing, supply chain, charity, and so forth. So until now, we have more than 120 applications in different industry, and also these applications all running in the production system, not for the demo. It's really case, okay? So thank you very much for EY's invitation to let us to have brief sharing for the FISCO because blockchain. And I want to say the next week is the Chinese New Year. I want to also say the happy Chinese New Year to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jinglong. It's also our honor to be part of the open source community and contribute back to the community. So I want to I want to actually showcase our OpsChain platform, and I want to set the theme of using a use case example to try to walk you through what I'm going to show you. So imagine that you're a pharma company, and it doesn't matter if you're not from life science company, because that applies to many different industries as well. You're effectively dealing with your local distributors, and they're like this two invoice the schemes for you to manage directly with your distributor, and your distributor have access to their hospitals. So the pharma companies will require the distributor to input the data into a distributor management systems of the pharma company and spend millions of dollars trying to do the stock taking and all of the inventories and to avoid the transshipments of the distributor. So they spent, this is due to this system, different silo systems and in not integrated operation. So we do believe that it goes back to our vision of trying to bring that end-to-end process onto the same blockchain. And this is the vision of why we built the OpsChain. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is the soon to go live the platform that's going to be hosted totally in China. And this is the OpsChain component with the mindset of the Lego style innovation. You have the different components. Then for procurement, for traceability, for tokens, which I'm going to show you a selection of those. So here you can manage your blockchain, so-called wallets or accounts on different kinds of blockchains. So for now, I'm going to show you the standalone FISCO BCOS instance, but in the future, we're also supporting the BSN. Actually, right now, we already support BSN, the FISCO BCOS version. And once you have those accounts, it sort of maps you to who you are on the blockchain and that you are entitled to some certain kind of business operation. For example, here, I'm setting up a pharma company and a distributor. So they can set up a business relationship. For example, me as a pharma company, I can set up my partner as a distributor. And this will enable us to start our business, okay? So I am the distributor. I can be able to create an RFQ to start with. For example, some selected vaccine to start with. Let's use a vaccine C. Then this creates an RFQ and send directly to the farmer, which then allows the farmer to make response to my vaccine RFQ. So I can propose my prices along with the tier price quantities, for example. And remember that this will be on the smart contract executed. And this actually allows you to share those contracts to multiple parties, like authorized buyers and authorized suppliers. So by submitting the proposal, me as the distributor switching back, I should be able to see these price proposals and create a contract according to the price that was proposed. Okay, so the contract will require dual signing. So switching back to the farmer, you can actually see that this proposal is requested, is approved, and you will have a contract pending for you to sign with the terms that you proposed. And once you have the contract, this will allow the two parties to initiate a transaction. As a distributor, I can initiate the order to my business partner according to the contract that I just set up, right? So here for the vaccine C, I can set up some amount, which will calculate based on the price that was agreed upon and submit my PO. So following that process, basically you can keep track of this entire end-to-end process of the procurement order, then accept the purchase order and be able to confirm the receipt and finish that process. So this enables a better integration of the product. And also following along, we also have some different questions like, as a pharma company, how do I prove the authenticity of my goods? So this is another part of our innovation, to use the traceability component that you can deploy your own smart contract on the BCOS network, and also be able to manage that permission and manage this entire value chain of your goods. You are able to set up different items to trace during the manufacturing, and also what kinds of data you want to associate with this kind of different steps. Finally, show to your end consumer that this is actually authentic. This is exactly from us. And finally, while using the tokenized design, then you can sort of use those goods and keep track of those goods while they are being transferred from party to party across their supply chain. And my colleague later, we're going to show you some baseline, discuss baseline and how we protect the privacy. So with all these components which are going to go live, so we believe that this will help us to stitch together our end-to-end business process on the same blockchain, the same environment. Right now, we are supporting our FISCO BCOS and BSN. And in the future, we are very looking much forward to BSN's open permission chain initiatives and try to bring everybody on the same blockchain, the same environment in a trusted and transparent way. So that concludes our sharing. And very happy to be here. Thanks again, Yifan and Jinlo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lynn, wow. You really nailed that demo. So we are very fortunate and very appreciative. Thank you. Yifan He, thank you so much. Junlong Lin, thank you so much. We're incredibly grateful, and I wish you all a happy new year as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I like the first shirt. I like the first one. Okay. I vote for that.
Excellent. Well, I have more shirts. We're coming. We're now on number 3, and we've got one more to go. So
I like the colorful one. Colorful one.
I've got another one. So I will execute a quick change for you.
Okay. I was actually a little bit let down, Paul, because you had hibiscus on, and I was just getting used to that for a good 5 minutes. You've already burned through 2 shirts. You got 2 more hours to go. I like to go into the landscaping though. I saw what you did. That was really nice. That was a good switch.
Well, the hibiscus shirt is really there to test your GPU and your compression and your decompression functionality.
Oh, that's good. My computer's got ADHD, as you can tell by my background going on here. Go Chiefs. So, yeah. Hey, Lynn. So Lynn just moved around $810,000 worth of vaccine C, just like that. That was impressive. Nice movement of goods there across the blockchain. Excellent. This is
so we are very honored. We should introduce you, JT, before we go too much further, but we're very honored to have you as a part of our follow-on discussion. Here we go, new t-shirt for you. JT is he is many things, but very importantly, he is the moderator of the Ethereum Finance Forum on Reddit, right? And if you haven't been following what's happening with Reddit and Wall Street and GameStop, then wow, there's not a lot I can do to help you. But long before GameStop and all Wall Street bets, JT is really notable for running what I think is the most thoughtful, intelligent, well-executed Ethereum forum in the Reddit ecosystem. I get better questions and more insightful analysis when I post there than anywhere else. And so his commentary is incredibly valuable. And so before I did get a couple of questions that were fed to me during my conversation, but before we go anywhere else, I would actually really like to hear your point of view, JT, and where you see blockchain going, and especially what you've thought about this confluence of the explosive growth of crypto, the rise of blockchain, the Wall Street bets kind of GameStop thing. Give us your point of view.
Yeah, so thank you for the nice words about what I do. We've got a great team over on ETH Finance, and as Paul said, we really do concentrate on having high signal. With that being said, the amount of stuff that's putting in through that subreddit and the ecosystem as a whole is just, it's mind-numbingly explosive. And to hear what I just heard, I think at the beginning here, where you were talking about the confluence in China, the DCEP and all the framework, you've got so many things coming out. I had no idea that in China in particular, over the course of 2020, all these massive steps forward. I mean, and what was it? The other statistic that popped out was 73% of purchase influencers consider it to be extremely important moving forward to embrace blockchain technology. And it sounds like the work that you guys are doing is going to start to wrap things up in China and make it easy to port over into the public blockchain space if it's not already starting. So those things really stood out to me. And then, of course, when you look at the explosive nature of DeFi in general over the course of 2020, there's a there is a monumental shift going on, and there's a whole lot of people trying to get in and try to build tools and make things work with it. Not just, not just the number go up, but also being able to do the asset allocation and really truly beneficial things. And the other slide is there about the we slides with the big pharma. I can imagine we have a real problem in the United States with pharmaceuticals. And I think some of this has to be due to fraud, insurance, everything else. It's going to make a whole lot of things more accountable across a wide variety of industries. It's impossible to keep up with on a daily basis. And I know that we're going to hear from David Hoffman later on, and that guy is super tuned in to a lot of this stuff. And I can't wait to hear what he has to say after reflecting on what we've just witnessed.
So one of the questions that I got in the discussion was, how have the conversations with enterprises changed over the last couple of years? And the answer is it's kind of been enormous. If you think about the forum kind of discussions that we have on Ethereum finance, the enterprise discussion is rarely that sophisticated. Enterprises have tended to start with what can you do about my existing business process? And they've been very nervous about the application of public blockchains. The thing that's been the huge sea change over the last 2 years is, if your Ethereum forum users were over here in terms of sophistication and their kind of focus on public blockchains and programmability, enterprise users have come much closer to them. We find 75% of our enterprise clients are now ready for public blockchains, or they're either ready for them, or what they tell us is they know that is where the future goes, and although they might not be ready, they are now planning toward that direction. So that has been kind of the big change. Have you seen in the finance forum a change over the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months, not just in the level of enthusiasm, but the type of things that people are talking about with regard to blockchain?
Well, there is a bit of meme culture in there, and we have had a real explosive amount. Just in terms of, let me go back. In terms of comments per subscriber, we are very high ranked in that regard. Our subscriber growth has definitely grown. It's basically doubled, easily over the course of the year. And we're seeing a lot of people that it's got that meme culture, right? So when Sushi Swap is going big, or Yearn or anything like that, that kind of takes over. But then you get these other comments that come back to, okay, but be careful. We've done this before. We've done this dance where we don't know, exactly who's writing the code or how it's all going to shape up. And then, so people have gotten wiser. And I think a lot of people are really starting to pay attention to kind of the broader, more long-term approach rather than the quick flip stuff. It's kind of a mix of both. Some days they can get a little noisy with the one-off deals, but we've got a lot. We have some contributors in there that are in there very regular, who post paragraphs of information, and that they're working in different sectors of finance. Of course, they won't reveal that, but you could tell there's a buzz within a lot of the commenters. We actually do a pretty good job of singling out good comments during the day and pin them to the top of the daily every day. We also pay attention to people that regularly guild the subreddit. And so there's a lot of metrics that we tag users in a way that we can find out who regulars are. And it helps the moderator team get to know our best of the best. So it's easy for us to amplify good content, and we try to do that. And it's kind of become its own ecosystem resource, almost like a Rolodex in a way, if you pay attention to the good contributors.
I do, certainly. I think earlier this year, I posed a question to the community, which was, I want to build a kind of an index to understand the total value of the Ethereum economic system, right? That's kind of how I'm starting to think about it. It's an economic system. And if you look at the market caps, it's very easy to say, okay, Ethereum is X. But what you have to understand is Ethereum is a certain amount of money, but then there's also all these other things that are transacted on inside of this ecosystem. And what I'm trying to do, ultimately what I want to, is to get kind of a GDP, right, a gross product for the Ethereum ecosystem. And I, of course, went to the ETH Finance Forum to do that. And I think, as enterprises move into it, it will change. One of the big things that questions I got also in the discussion is, will the DeFi ecosystem evolve when enterprises interact with it? And the answer is not just will it, but we are going to try to actively help it evolve. And there's going to be a panel a little bit later. After our next session is with my colleague Didi. He's going to talk about PFM, but later on we're going to talk about the baseline protocol. And baseline protocol is tremendously important because it's a foundation for secure private transactions on public blockchains. And my goal is not just to change the DeFi ecosystem, but really to make it enterprise friendly, and in so doing, explode the number of assets that will run in this environment. And I'm going to be working with John Wolpert over at Baseline to launch an initiative in the next couple of months to convene a lot of the top DeFi firms and to have a big, tightly focused run at creating a set of standards and tools that will allow, let's say, a purchase order coming out of EY OpsChain to be going onto the public blockchain and for it to be financed, right, by a different company. EY, we're not going to become a financial services entity, right? But our clients can generate that purchase order. And if we do it right, and we work with the community and we set up some standards, when that purchase order gets on chain, right, the company that issued it can get financing and working capital. And I want to see that happen. So, and I know, and let me put it this way, I don't want to wait for it to happen on its own. We are going to work with these companies to make it happen. So JT, thank you so much for joining, right? Very grateful. And let me hand it over to Didi Mishra, who is our E&Y blockchain and IoT leader in Japan. Didi, hope you are doing great. It's lovely to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in person again soon. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Paul. So a lot of enterprise talk, we have did it, and now we are talking about how exactly the public sector is innovating themselves and how UI is helping them in this journey. So it's a very interesting topic, how exactly we have started working with the public sectors and what is the need of the innovation in the public sector. We'll be discussing about that. So right. So here you go. So we have today's agenda is like, how the innovation happened in the public sector and how UI is helping them with the blockchain using the UI OpsChain PFM and our architecture for the public sector, and how we have activated our public finance manager in different countries. We have the 3 use case: City of Toronto, Australia, and Japan city government, and also the international institute activations like IMF and other international finance institute with grants, loans, and provide loans and grants. And also we'll see that what exactly we are going to do in the future. So going to the fundamental understanding of why the government sector and how the government sector are innovating themselves. So there are the 3 most important fundamental issues that we observe from our working relation from a long time with all the governments around the world. There are 3 things which all the governments are mostly required. One is the transparency, transparent and accurate and continuous information of financial reporting. So that's the first pillar which the PFM was the government need to be more precisely working with the improvement part. And second part is the administrative efficiency. So you can take about the expenditure management, budgeting. They all are administrative efficiency need to be improved for the government from the government prospect. And other thing is that combining the finance and non-finance data together to give some valuable strategic output for that. So So these are the things which would like to just hold on for 1 minute. So when you talk about the pandemic, right now a pandemic is a fundamental happening in every country right now. Before the pandemic, also there are a lot of problems associated with governments, like global trade, sluggish economic growth, the climate changes, global tensions, geopolitical inequality, and there are a lot of shift of global power is happening throughout the world. So after the pandemic happened, how exactly it is hampering to the governments, and what are the expectations from the government is going to happen? So in the pandemic, what happened? The government, the expectation from the government are rising globally. And with the low economic growth and tight public finance, the challenges are rarely met with the government. They cannot, all the government cannot pump a lot of money into that because the economic growth is lower, and they cannot add a lot of extra people to that. So all the government must do with their lease budget. And they have to go for a high performance, high efficiency, high care. So what I suggest that the pandemic is a wake-up call for all the leaders to understand how, how we are, doing before. It need to be changed, and it need to be innovative way to reshaping our, providing the good governance to the people. So going to the what exactly. So this is what we have discussed about how the government needs to be innovate, and now going to the public finance manager, what we have developed with our blockchain team here, with the GPS team together. So we have come up with a solution after we had a great collaboration with a different government sector. So how the reconciliation of the data is one kind of the government data from one department to the other department. It is kind of a very hard to sharing the data between the two departments. Other thing is that how the informations and external agencies. So when the government is working with the external agency, how they can, there is a gap between the external agency to work with the government. They have a problem with the data sharing between the government agencies. It's because some of the local vendors, they don't have any any platform to share the data between the government and the local agency. And what are the spending the governments are doing? They don't have any kind of control over what are the outcome is coming out of the spending they are doing with that. So the PFM blockchain, which we have developed, it helped the government to control the expenditure, revenue, grants, asset, and performance, future development for the direct services, and to deliver functionalities for that. And PFM has also shown dramatic ability to reduce the administrative effect. Like a lot of governments have a lot of administrative effects. So there are a lot of administrative work, which is the data reconciliation, track of financial reporting. So these are things are the major fundamental problem which we observe in a government workspace, and then we build our system. So let me go through our logical architecture. This logical architecture is a 5-layer architecture. So in the base of the architecture, we have blockchain protocol and the cloud infrastructure, and above that we have OpsChain, the business layer where we are user authentication and organization permissions, asset tokens, business smart contracts, and PFM token model. So this is our core OpsChain facility. Then top of that we have PFM core capability, which is all these capabilities and business related to the government. So like, how the procurement for the government can be done, how the asset management can be government for the done, and the program funding and the loans and grants and management, how the performance and expenses reporting can be taken care for the government sectors, and how the audit and regulatory compliances can be taken together. So these are the PFM core capabilities have given in this layer. And then top of that, the client applications like loan and grant management, transfer payments, citizen services. So these are the client applications on the top of that. And top of that, on the upper layer, the revenue department. So what are the departments can be take the advantage of this architecture? The revenue department, the expenditure department, the regulatory department, and direct delivery department. On the top of that, so it's going to be helpful for the national government, the state government, the regional government, the city municipal, and the international institute. So the whole architecture is designed for this segment of user segments. So going to that, so how exactly we have implemented this architecture for different sectors. So let me go through that. So we have 3 use cases today. One is the city of Toronto, where we have started this journey. So and then we have been discussing with a lot of city governments, almost 238 city governments in Japan. So which they want to improve their governance and improve public sector outcomes. And other is the Western Australia. So let me go through one by one use cases. In the city of Toronto, budgeting, delivery, and service. So in the city of Toronto, the fleet management is one of the biggest issue for the Toronto city government. So we have we have discussed about the 40 plus operating divisions where they have interconnected with each other for the fleet management service, and they have their interdivisional changes back, how they provide the real-time operation, asset allocation, how they can track their asset, how they track and the vehicle operation mode. So these all things are we observe this kind of problems which in the city of Toronto. Then what we did, we started going for a POC first, and started establishing the vehicle asset inventory division, then work order, undergoing maintenance. So we have collected all the things and give this kind of applications to be, this kind of data to be integrated together. And then the tracking of asset and inventory management, increasing the transparency. So what the outcome comes is a phenomenal. So the data which is coming to the system and the PFM system give a very big clarity, and the knowledge graph becomes so clear and transparent. The government can track from the central budget authority to the last who is spending the money, who the money is going to whom, and how their asset has been used, and what kind of the outputs are coming up from there. So this is one platform where the government can track, and the data are so transparent, so that the knowledge outcome is very well executed. So going to the Japan use case. So in Japan is a very orthodox country, and in Japan, most of the projects are executed with many different government departments, to execute one project, many different government subsidies are working together. But the thing is that they have a problem of sharing the individual information from one to other. So we have been working with the government agency in Japan, how they can have a common platform to expenditure trend analysis, how they can execute the status monitoring and the maintenance cost and analysis, and the business result visualization. So this is one of the platform we have been discussing with a lot of city governments, because the Japan, most of the governments after the pandemic, they want to reduce their budget and provide the good governance to the people here in Japan. So what we did, we did the our base PFM platform and customize it with the Japanese language, the Japanese data, and the knowledge graph. Everything is we make it standardized based on the Japanese environment. So saying that, so it's a so pluggable architecture we have developed with the PFM. So it's a very easily customizable, and it can be easily changed to any language, which most of the city governments wants to work in their local language, especially in the Asia Pacific. We have many language people use in different countries. So it can be easily customized to the different platforms. So going to the next one, the Australian one, when the use case come to the Western Australia, come to us for the education department. They want to improve their infrastructure for the education department because so when you talk to the schools, they have they're not sure about how the job has been allocated, to whom the job has been allocated to fix that. So they have to call to the call center. Call center had the problem of how they have started, who is the when they will complete the things. Then the maintenance contractor is not sure about how the jobs can be done, how can I better prioritize my work. Then the Department of Finance having their questions like how the work have been done with the standard needed and the right information to the facility management, or what invoice need to be outstanding. So they don't have that kind of clarity, and they have all the Department of Finance as well as Department of Education. They're not sure about, the school is happy about what the spending have been done. And Treasury, which allocate the money, they don't have any kind of visibility how the school have been repaired, the school is happy with the maintenance work or not. So taking that one, so what we did, we understood the gap, and we try to connect with each from school to center, call center to maintenance contractor together. So we understand the gap between each individual entities, and we try to connect each other using the blockchain, using the PFM, so that the Treasury can get enough information the school is happy about or not, and the Department of Education can get that school and the Treasury can be the budget has been allocated to proper school or not, and the maintenance worker is get payment or not, and the receiving invoice have been clear with the contractor or not. So these are all the things are having a clear information from each other, each entities in a proper way. So going to the global activations. So how exactly global institutes like IMF, International Monetary Fund have opened it through a challenge with the collaborative members that how we can reduce the corruptions in the monetary when they're transferring a budget, how they're funding to the other entities, how they can reduce the corruption and make the transparency level very high. So we have been modified the architecture, the PFM architecture for them, and developed we have been competing with the other peoples in the competitions, and we provide a blockchain-based robust solution which give a very clear picture how we can reduce the corruption in the especially when you are doing the monetary transactions. And also there is another financial entity which supply grants and supply to the grants and loans to the other countries. After they allocated the grants and the loans, they don't have visibility of how exactly the monetary system manage the things. So from 100%, they have not able to see the 100% visibility of their funds. So we have been working with that International Monetary Fund to show how exactly they can track from each entity, each individual entities. And we have developed a mobile application so that all individual can enter their financial positions and the spending from there. So then going to our next step, what exactly in the PFM in the future, what is planning to do is from the government prospect, we are going to work on the expenditure, how the real-time transfer and expenditure of funds can be integrated with our reporting system, how regulatory compliance, creating, implementing, enforcing compliance-focused regulations can be taken care with the PFM, and the revenue from generating through the taxes, fees, and non-taxes revenues can be collaboratively together, combined together with the PFM functionalities. So that is also, we are going to work on that. And direct delivery, increasing the speed, accuracy, and low compliance cost should be taken care inside the PFM to create a better working world for all. With that, I'd like to finish my presentations. And if you have any questions at any time, so you can reach out to all the members here listed.
Thank you, Didi. Thank you very much. That's Didi for you. Didi is our blockchain and IoT technology leader in EY Japan. So we're going to talk a little bit about PFM later on during the commentary. Meanwhile, the next segment, we're going to have a panel discussion. And I'm very happy to have with me 3 esteemed panelists. So we have Charles, who is the Director of Strategic Initiatives from Consensus. Vito Chin is joining us from Microsoft. Vito is the Asia Pacific Senior Cloud Solution Architect. And we have Victor Poo, who is our EY Asia Pacific Blockchain Technical Architect. So welcome, Charles, Vito, and Victor. How are you guys?
Very good morning, Jimmy. Thank you for having us.
Great, Charles. Great.
Hey, so, good morning, Jimmy. Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Victor. So I'm going to just start off the panel discussion with our topic as well. Something that we have all have in common, the baseline protocol, and we are going to discuss from very basics about what is baseline to how you're going to use baseline in this 30 minutes. So maybe just to help us understand, what is baseline, to those of us who are new in the audience that have not seen baseline, Charles, do you mind telling us a little bit about baseline, perhaps an introduction of how it came about and how did EY, Consensus, and Microsoft started this journey?
Yes, absolutely, and feel free to jump in. I think baseline is really a group effort between EY, Microsoft, and Consensus. So it's and it has been since been a team which has been expanded. And I think the idea behind baseline is really to look at how companies and industries have been reorganizing themselves over time. So if you try to imagine a Ford car factory back in the days, it was totally integrated, and every single component was part of this factory and made within the factory. Later on, the industries started to outsource some non-core activities, and then started to have a need for information sharing between the core of the factory and some outsource activities. And today, if you look at your computer or maybe the mobile phone you have in your pocket, it's probably manufactured by what we call some kind of assembly manufacturer, and every single component is coming from outside. So the way the industries have reinvented themselves has also bring some new needs for distributing the data and distributing the data flows between these different suppliers. So I think this is really the kind of genesis idea behind baseline. And what baseline does today is really leveraging the global reach of the Ethereum mainnet network. It's a very mature network now. It has more than 5 years. It has a very strong product market fit and a very strong success. which is sometimes challenging, but the progress of the technology is compensating with that. But it's really good to feel that actually the demand is really extremely strong on this mainnet. And what Baseline does is essentially using the mainnet as some kind of a bulletin board to make sure that all the different systems from different companies working together will be aligned with the same data using some hashes. But I'm sure there is some more technical definition of baseline coming from the EY team or maybe Vito from Microsoft as well.
That's right, Charles. I think I really like your analogy, on the car assembly, and it is true today, right, that the industry is getting very vertically integrated, and Baseline serve kind of as a platform for you to do the assembly as well. So Vito, perhaps you can share a little bit as well on the Microsoft's involvement in Baseline. We know that it has been a crucial aspect of the development as well. Perhaps something on what have Microsoft done as part of the Baseline introduction.
Yeah. So this whole thing actually started as I mean the whole effort here is actually part of our digital transformation effort, right? I think Baseline is exciting to us because there's this aspect, there's one element that I want to focus on, right? This is non-repudiation. So if you think about the current scenario, right, like the world, the pandemic scenario, so I'm in the office right now, but I've been working from home for about, close to 10 months to a year. Yeah, but thankfully in Singapore, we are able to come back to office, and yeah, it's still nice to work in the office. But during the pandemic, I was receiving goods, right, from the delivery folks, right? And during the earlier times, so I'm just trying to paint a picture of why baselining can be very practical, right? So during the earlier parts of the pandemic, right, like we were just starting to take deliveries. We're not that used to it yet, right? There's still this old school signing, right? So we were signing. The signature when I received the package, right, is actually to signify that I confirm, that I have received the package. So it's a form of medieval non-repudiation, I would say, meaning I don't deny receiving it, right? So if you look at it, right, this is kind of like the most important aspect of enterprise business, and actually to a greater extent in societal transactions as well, right? So the building blocks of society builds on trust, and people not repudiating whatever they've committed to, right? So the signature, right, that simple signature is actually a form of confirming, that I won't repudiate. I won't deny that I've received it, but it's actually very, very rudimentary and kind of pointless, to be honest, because most of the time the signature is like on some LCD screen that I couldn't really sign properly, and I could still repudiate. And then we evolve, right? And then we evolve into this scenario where we have chop sign, right? Within enterprises, right? There's another chop. But the chop is also very easily duplicated, right? Like, I can go to a chop maker and ask him to, make a chop of whatever company I want to kind of like spoof, right? So the next evolution, right, then comes centralized, then we trust this central a central party, right? And that's where Microsoft was actually delivering a lot of solutions on that basis. This was a few years back, and then we evolved into a situation where public blockchain came about, right? And public blockchain is interesting, and we do use public blockchain to a certain extent on that basis, right? Especially for our decentralized identity effort. But if you look at it, right, one aspect that public blockchain is dangerous on, right, is the non-repudiation is still not 100%, right? If I have enough stake, right, because the identity, if I have messed up my public key, for example, right? Like if I transact, say I trade on GameStop, right? And somehow I messed up in GameStop. Yeah, so I'm just a little bit worried that I've gone over time here, but anyway, so if I messed up my public key, you know, if I'm transacting on my wallet and I completely messed it up, you know, I suffered a lot of loss. At that point, right, it's not too crazy to think that I'll give up my private blockchain. I can repudiate my identity, you know, because all my identity is just some hash, you know, it's not really me.
Yeah.
So then comes private blockchain. You know, we have enterprises coming in, and then there's off-chain contracts in a consortium. When you join a consortium, there's typically off-chain conversations, you know, off-chain legalities that are set up in a enterprise private blockchain. And then to speed things up a little bit, now we have baselining, which has explicit structure to support the kind of things that we used to do on private blockchain. On the public blockchain, like public mainnets.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, there's we can talk about it a little while more. So I'll stop here and then we'll come back.
Thanks, Vito. I think you gave a very good picture of the timeline as well of this evolution and how it goes. And I really like that. I think that baseline will provide that protocol that's needed for people to, in a way, verify each other and be able to sign online, and that's not repudiated because it is public and everybody can see that. So that's really nice. And I like your background, by the way. You know, it's a really nice picture. You got a nice window seat, I see. So let me just quickly move on. Victor, maybe this is for you. You know, I wanted to just elaborate a bit about the usage of baseline. Maybe you can help us, you know, understand two things. You know, why is there a need for baseline? What are the business drivers? And if I can throw in one more point in the mix as well, you know, perhaps Victor, you can share also how have you seen baseline being used in the industry today? You know, it's something that started, you know, just a couple of years back, you know, maybe just a year back, but it has been used in many places already. Maybe you can share a little bit about that as well, Victor.
Oh yeah, sure. Thanks, Jimmy. And great points, Charles and Vito. Maybe just to quickly add for baseline. First off, baseline is not a product. It's not a platform. It's not a chain. It's not a coin or a scheme. You can think of it more of a design pattern. And it just allows multiple organizations to interact with each other end to end on the public mainnet. The great idea was around the fact that the baseline is treating the mainnet as a middleware. And John Warpert from Consensus refers to this as that magic bus, right? It's always on bulletin board, as Charles has mentioned. To answer your question, Jimmy, around why is there a need for baseline and what are business drivers? We did a report a while back. We surveyed 233 of these enterprise executives, and 75% of them said that they want to use a public blockchain for their business process. But the biggest hurdle, right, when you want to use a public blockchain, there are three points. There's privacy, permission, and performance. So privacy, you know, what data am I putting on the chain? The last thing you want is your competitors to develop a classifier for your transactions using some advanced AI to glean information about your business process and partners. Permissions, right? Who's allowed to be part of my process, who can check my data, and who can add additional data to process. And finally, performance. So there's still that misconception where the enterprise sees blockchain as a distributed database. And really, that's not the case. Blockchain can be seen as a state machine, and we can use that as a way to make sure that the transactions happen in a certain order. So if you look at baseline and you go back to those considerations and challenges, baseline addresses that concern. You know, CIOs everywhere who's conscious of the challenge of data security, privacy, performance, and consistency. It does this by using zero knowledge proof. So I'm the architect, right? So I'll talk about the technical stuff of it as well. And happy to explain zero knowledge proofs offline if anyone's interested. The thing is, the data never actually leaves the traditional system of records. So I could have a system and I can baseline that system with, say, Vito and Charles' system, and we can actually do business transactions across those. We can do a business workflow, etc. And Charles won't be able to see what's happening with Vito. Vito won't be able to see what's happening with Charles. So there is privacy, permission, all covered. So, I mean, where do you want to use baseline, right? There are some key areas where you want to use it, and there's some areas that may not be as applicable. So if you have business process automation between, say, multiple partners, and that's a primary requirement, baseline is a good example. If 20% of your partners are like SMEs or do very low volumes, and it's very hard to set up an enterprise service bus between us, then baseline is a good example. Yep. So maybe to touch on that point very quickly, if you look at what we do in baseline, we're actually just communicating between two or more organizations. So how do you do that? You can either set a primary and a secondary system. So two systems of records, one can be a primary, one can be a secondary. You can set up an enterprise service bus, or you can set up baseline between it. So the great thing about baseline is it's always on, and there's no barriers to entry. So you pay for what you use, stranded per transaction. Going back to the other use cases, it also reduces upfront capital costs, right? So you're trading CapEx for OpEx, so you don't actually have to invest in these large enterprise service bus or infrastructure. And I think the key point was not all partners have to access or be aware of every step in that workflow, and that's what's called atomic compartmentalization. So it allows for complex collaborations where privacy is preserved across all the different participants. And just to address quickly your point, Jimmy, around where the baseline is being used in industry, it's right now the baseline community, with the help of a lot of industry experts and organizations, have developed many different adapters. So the adapters ranging from ERPs with Dynamics, SAP, all the way through to spreadsheets, right? So you can baseline Google Spreadsheet and Microsoft Excel, along with your ERP. So an ERP can communicate with a Google Spreadsheet. So you imagine your small mom and pop shops who store their data inside a spreadsheet can integrate directly with these multi-million-dollar ERP systems that store your data. Maybe to jump on what the industry is using. So there's a large soft drink manufacturer. If you Google it, you'll find it, where they have a project using baseline on public Ethereum to connect multiple organizations for the bottling companies. So it's just an extension of their earlier blockchain, but now they're using a block on baseline on the public mainnet. And finally, also EY is also using it for their network procurement tools as well. And we're making OpsChain technology compliant with Nightfall and baseline. So that's just a quick answer to the questions.
Thanks, Victor. I think it's a few good examples. I like that you shared that there's very complex logic behind it called Nightfall zero knowledge proof. If we have some time later on, maybe we can spend a bit of time to elaborate it. But it's always a challenge to explain how zero knowledge proof works. But you also mentioned that it can be something as simple as uploading a spreadsheet, being able to connect directly to baseline, to the open network through a simple GUI as well. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that as well. So maybe Charles, back to you as well. Any examples also of how you have seen baseline being used in the industry?
I think the journey, so I'm just thinking of the audience here, and I'm sure if people are joining this morning or this evening the UI Blockchain Summit, it's because they already have their fingers on this technology and they are building. And to me, what baseline really means is it's kind of moving forward and scaling up on a lot of blockchain initiatives which have been built by many people around the world on private and permission blockchains. And one of the bottleneck is when you build this kind of private chain, they can be safe, they can be easier, less questions come to mind, you move a little bit faster, but commercially, it's really hard to grow. When you are building an intranet and you have to convince and pitch every new member to dedicate connectivity resources and time to connect to this private club, it's really hard. And commercially, a lot of these private and permission blockchain initiative have shown some limitation, some limited success. Beyond the founding members, you don't really expand. And I think there is this kind of realization coming up to the early builders of the blockchain industry that building private clubs commercially does not make sense, and it's really kind of cap the value proposition and cap the growth of your project. So it's really kind of translate into how do we move to a new type of infrastructure, a new type of architecture of the business model, so we get the maximum reach, and whatever counterparts or stakeholders can jump in and connect with us. And I'm really excited to see how many companies are beyond the protocol to the baseline. So if you look at Chainlink, which is some kind of DeFi darling, you look of course at Splunk, at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, the Ethereum Foundation. So we are really in great company at baseline, and the use cases are being built every month. So that's really really a step in the future for anyone joining this kind of architecture and ways of building on the top of blockchain.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. Indeed, you have shared that the growth has been tremendous. Even though it's the initial days is difficult to get people on top of the ecosystem, but as the public and as the participants get more educated about the needs of it, that's where you see baseline growing as well. You see the usage growing since its inception as well. So how has the ecosystem evolved since its inception, Charles? So maybe a quick one just to expand a little bit on what you have shared.
Sure. So I'll refer to some good work of my colleague John Volpert from Consensus. But if you look at the history of the protocol, it started in 2019, and it very quickly get the first baseline kind of release done early March 2020. Then there was more participants joining. The V01 implementation was over the summer of 2020. And more people join. So there is today more than 1,800 community members, 11 corporate sponsors, building and growing the capabilities. And of course, last November, the first summit of Baseline happened, as well as the first hackathon in December. So if you look at this pattern and the pace, is just essentially shouting at you that this is getting a very strong momentum and a very strong pull from the market. So that's a great and very inspiring history. And I think it's only the introduction. The chapter 1 is barely started. So super excited.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am excited about how it's grown so quickly, so fast as well.
That's a very strong sign, right?
Yeah, it is. It's got a community kind of on its own as well. And Victor, you have been very much part of this community on Baseline as well, on how it's evolved. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure, Jimmy. So the Baseline community, if you're interested to join, it is an open source community from Oasis. You go to baseline I think baseline.protocol, is it? .org. Let me just check my links. Yeah, baseline.protocol. I think baseline.protocol. I'll get that link later. So the community is very interesting. I mean, we just finished the first Baseline hackathon, and you can join that on Gitcoin. You can have a look at that as well. There was tens of thousands in prizes, and there was categories ranging from scalability, privacy, decentralized identities, and integration with Microsoft itself. So there's a lot of interesting hackathons. The community itself has grown huge. It went from 14 to around, I think, thousands of people have joined the membership as well. Beyond that, I mean, if you're interested in joining the community, it's always open. Anyone can join. You can join through Slack. You can through Twitter. I think Discord, Carrier Pigeon. Any of these communication mediums. We're all fully supported. And John Warpert and the technical team are always happy to join into discussion. So he's very active on Slack and Twitter. So if you ask a question, he will get back to you pretty quickly.
That's great. Thanks, Victor.
There is office hours also. So if you follow the Twitter and LinkedIn feeds, you will see like on a regular basis there is office hours with people like freely joining, asking questions, getting answered. live. So it's really hands-on and the spirit we like to work on.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Charles. Thanks, Victor.
Maybe just quickly adding, sorry, Jimmy. I mean, if you go there as well, you see the protocol specification and reference implementation. So we put a few reference implementations up there for integration. So there's a reference implementation for integration between SAP and Dynamics, Google Spreadsheets and Dynamics, and also an implementation that shows you how baseline can be used between 2 different technology stacks. So you think of it like Gmail versus Outlook.
I'm
so
sure
they can still communicate because they have the same protocol.
The audience will be very keen as well. I see somebody already posted the baseline community on Slack on the question and answer. So if you are keen, just take a look there and you can see where to join as well. I'd like to just quickly get back to Vito as well, because I did mention that if we can, we want to just elaborate a little bit about the components that make up baseline. So maybe Vito, if you can, just help us understand, what is baseline components and how is it being built up?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few things. There's the org registry, and then shield contract and the verifier. Just keep these 3 things in mind, right? So the org registry is kind of like your Rolodex of participants in a baselining consortium, right? So the members of this that's in this org registry, right? They can actually submit proofs to the verifier, right? So the proofs then, the verifier then makes sure that the counterparties, right, those that are in this particular scenario, right, has performed all the workflow steps, right, and it's performed consistently and it's adhering to the rules of the of any previous workflow step, or the rules that are defined for this particular baselining scenario. So once the verifier verifies that, the proof then gets added to a leaf of the Merkle tree that's actually in the shield contract. So yeah, so that's essentially the components that makes up a simple baselining scenario.
Yeah, thanks, Vito. We have maybe 3 to 4 minutes left, and I just like to perhaps ask a question on behalf of the audience here, who might be curious, if they want to embark on baseline, if their companies or their organizations want to embark on baseline, how do I get this started? So maybe can I put that to Charles first? Would you like to see, how would you advise or help a person or enterprise start off baseline?
So I would recommend them to choose a great IT specialist, such as Microsoft, for example. I would suggest them to complement this IT champion with a top-notch consulting firm such as EY for all the architecture and the business flow, and also work together with Consensus as the expert and best-in-class blockchain architect and service providers. It's a joke, but I think it's not really a joke. Just look at what you built previously on blockchain. And be very candid and honest. We are all building this industry every day. We all started with some kind of focus on private chain. Now we want to get more reach. Maybe you can start to rebuild from some of the elements, but reach out to EY, to Microsoft, to the community, to Consensus, and look a little bit how the code is progressing. Make some test cases. I think you're going to find some really strong proposition. And as Victor was explaining, the data stays in mostly where the data is, and that's a very strong sell internally. So if you still have question mark within your organization about blockchain, if you had mine successes with some of the consortium or private chain you built, it's really a good time right now to have a fresh look at it. And reach out to the community and also the founding members and the new members of the baseline protocol.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Vito, anything to add to that as well?
Yes, I do. Okay, one interesting thing, right? If you want to try baseline, right? If you are a Dynamics user, there is a solution in Dynamics that actually allows you to leverage baseline as a tag like already today, right? So that's one thing. But seriously, my recommendation is if you are thinking about either private blockchain or now baseline, do a little bit of. It's important to understand some prior art here, right? There's also it's also important to actually look at the broader ecosystem. Baselining is cool, but there is also the DID, right? Decentralized ID. And it's important to kind of use the right tool for the right scenario. And there's also some integration between DID and baselining. So yeah, I'll recommend that. And yeah, if you're a Microsoft customer and if you want to embark on a project on baseline or decentralization, yeah, please reach out to your account executives and we'll be happy to chat further.
Thank you, Vito. And final word from you, Victor. We have half a minute more.
All right, I'll do this quickly then. Yeah, join the baselineprotocol.org. It also has a GitHub repository there, so you can download the source code and really inspect it. Consider joining the baseline community, as I mentioned before. And for more information, you can always reach out to Jimmy Ong from the APAC region or Paul Brody globally. So EY blockchain team is globally connected, and we align on the same vision of driving enterprise adoption of the public Ethereum mainnet.
Thank you. Thanks, Victor. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, again, for joining me on this panel. It's been great discussion. And I'm sure that you will get more questions later on baseline as well. And I look forward to more baselining in future with you guys as well. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Vito. And thanks, Victor.
Hey, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody. We will now go into a short break and resume back at 11 a.m. But during this break, I'm happy to invite Lin Mao and JT to come back again for just a quick commentary on the past two segments that has passed. So Lin, Jeremy, are you there?
Hey, I'm here, ready to roll.
Hello,
Jimmy. Thanks for
Hey,
having me.
there's my big drug pusher right there. 810,000 on the blockchain. Good job. I appreciate
it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks, JT. So for those that have not been on the earlier session with JT and Lin, so JT is the Reddit ETH Finance and ETH Staker moderator, and Lin is part of our Shanghai race-based team and our CTO out in China as well for EY blockchain. So thanks, guys, for joining me for this as well. We have had two rounds of discussion. The first one with DD on Public Finance Manager. So maybe JT, to you first. Any thoughts about public sector using blockchain and anything about public sector finance as well?
Yeah. So I believe at the beginning of that last segment, they were talking about like the governments have to do more with less. So streamlining costs and using the power of blockchain to be able to, help connect 8 different problems, instead of having to filter from one to the next, it can all be interconnected, and through a smart contract, different entities can sign off on different things much more fluidly. My thought is, will this eventually lead to smaller government? Are we going to see smaller governments come out of this? Does the end user get less taxes? I mean, if we're going to enable all these efficiencies, this is just me thinking on kind of an economic level, then the fruit needs to fall from the tree down to the people that are supposedly getting the benefit of this. And the other thought was on the school capital outlay scenario too. I work in public education, and every time, you've got a roof to fix or something like that, the schools really don't have a lot of money to be spending on time and wasted energy. So I could see, especially in the public school system in the United States, anything to cut costs there would be greatly appreciated. But yeah, that's my takeaway on this, especially the city, I think it was Japan, the way that they're doing some of that stuff is fantastic. I just want to see where that ends up and do the taxpayers benefit in the end, because that's who it should benefit the first, I would think.
Exactly. How it goes back to the last person, and that transparency really helps pinpoint where the source of fund is coming from as well. Maybe Lynn, any thoughts from your side as well?
Yeah, some thoughts from the eastern side of the world. So actually, I think for government use cases, it's really, believe it or not, it's really kind of the easiest case that you can adopt and put into production and engage the other entities to engage on the platform and play along with you. So we've seen a lot of cases in the public sector, like the fund management, like the certification, like notarization cases. And I think for Chinese government, they're taking those documents notarized on the blockchain as the actual evidence to support those e-courts, right? So for those cases, I think they're not really complicated cases, but they're putting blockchain into very great use. And this sets some expectation that this is a technology that can actually be helpful and create a better, a government. And also in terms of the fund management, I do see some cases, like we also did some cases for local government, like they're managing their funds, some like their construction projects, then even be able to trace how the funds actually goes into the supplier and actually goes into the worker of the supplier and goes into their pocket. So kind of eliminate those kind of corruptions in between. And this is what the government is trying to establish by utilizing the technology to a great level and bring that confidence back to the general public.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Lynn. We are almost up on time. I'm going to just squeeze in 1 minute for JT or any thoughts about baselining as well.
Yeah, I want to use my minute just to let people know on our subreddit, it's free to do this. If you are hosting a hackathon and you wanted to have exposure in front of thousands and thousands of people every day, we actually hosted the baseline hackathon. It's still in our sticky at the top of the daily. It gets 24 hours of exposure for weeks at a time. The baseline hackathon is over, but we leave it up for an extended period of time. People can go back and look at the teams, the projects, the prizes, and whatnot. And it's constantly being updated. So if any of you have a hackathon that maybe we don't know about, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, JT. Thanks so much, Lynn, as well. Really appreciate all your comments. I see Adam is already on the line, and we are ready to swing into the third segment, probably the part 2 of our blockchain summit, of our APEC blockchain summit. So Adam, welcome on board. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, doing well, thank you. And that was a really interesting first part of the session today. In particular, in the last session on baseline, it's good to hear from Microsoft and Consensus on that as well. So coming up after this, we're going to be having a keynote session, which is being run by David Bird. David is our global assurance strategy leader for blockchain. And he's going to talk about how we can elevate trust in blockchain and how that interacts with assurance and audit. We're then going to follow up after that with a panel discussion. And that panel is going to be talking about the rise of digital assets. So it's going to be looking at some observations around the digital asset market. And in particular, regulatory compliance and operational and how those can be overlaid on top of the market to enhance the ecosystem trust. And then lastly, we have Scott Waller and Zingy from our Australia group, and they're going to be talking about how we can manage risk in blockchain projects. And also a demonstration of our blockchain risk navigator.
Yep, thanks, Adam. I think it's really an exciting lineup. I am looking forward to both the keynote and the panel as well. I think digital assets has been something that has come up quite a fair bit. I mean, not less because of the the Bitcoin and crypto jump recently as well. Yeah, but people are starting to realize as well that digital assets is a lot more than just cryptocurrency, and we do see quite a big take up in different areas, right? From very big financial services institution to startup and exchange that's growing as well and venturing into this space. So Maybe your thoughts as well before we jump to the keynote. With all these new digital assets coming up, what is your view of the things going ahead? How do you think this space will evolve? Will it be predominantly still dominated by the startup crypto space, or do you see the bigger entities and bigger enterprises coming into this play more and more so as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot more institutionalization of the kind of wider digital assets ecosystem, in particular over the last year or so. There's a lot more interest from funds, for example. But I think, to me, the real game changer is really around the regulatory environment, because it adds credibility to the whole ecosystem, and it provides a layer of trust that exchanges are operating in the manner that people expect them to be. So that I think, in terms of moving it from a startup environment to something which is further ahead in the life cycle is very important, and it sets the right bedrock for those companies to thrive.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So I see that David Bird is already online and ready. David is our blockchain assurance strategy leader. So I am going to pass it over to you, David, for the keynote on our second part. Take it away, David.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy. And thank you, Adam. Really appreciate that. Well, I'll kick it off by sharing the screen here. Let me know when you can see that. Can you see that, Jimmy?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So it's really wonderful to be here and speak to all of you. Like Jimmy said, I'm David Bird. I'm our firm's blockchain strategy leader for Assurance, which really is a global role, and it's amazing to see how we've come together globally on this topic. I'm joining you from San Francisco today. If we weren't in the present circumstance, then I would be there, in that part of the world, if I could, probably sitting in Singapore. But happy that we can do this remotely. What I'd like to talk to you about today, as you can see in the title, is elevating trust in the blockchain ecosystem through assurance. And it's a long title, and what does that mean? That means that there's a lot going on in the blockchain space right now, especially considering digital assets that folks have been talking about on the summit so far. And to really take advantage of all of the benefits and the virtues of using blockchains today, you need to be able to navigate this environment. That means you need to be able to identify significant risks. You need to be able to put in place controls that reduce that risk. And so that's what I'd like to chat with you about today. Let me just go to the next slide here. Okay. Jimmy, can you see the next slide okay?
Yes, it's good, and I'm hearing you loud and clear as well.
Great. I'll try not to speak too loudly. I often get that criticism. So how to begin? Well, the market has really finally seen some significant adoption. And by the market, I mean the use of blockchain technology in all of its forms. For instance, what? Well, there's been a lot of conversations around how initially there was adoption of blockchains by individuals in the retail market, but now we're seeing a greater and greater institutional adoption. That is, significantly sized companies, corporations, businesses playing a role in this space. Digital assets have been mentioned, and I'll try not to steal too much of the thunder from the panel that follows me on that topic. But of course, like Jimmy and Adam had said, sure, there's discussions around cryptocurrencies in particular, but there are also such a wide variety of other assets that have been tokenized. Assets that are backed by all sorts of activity. If you think about examples, of the sort of reporting that we've seen lately. You've got sort of exciting trends in all the categories. Like we said on the top right here, you can see, of course, the institutional investment in this space. I think this new asset class now represents around $1 trillion worth of activity, which is showing up on the radar for a number of folks. But digital assets, like you've seen them, Bitcoin and other things like that, aren't the only sort of assets involved. Platforms are using blockchains to issue, bonds of significant size and importance. We're seeing blockchains. Here we have an example of where it's being used to track the temperature for coronavirus vaccines, very important. And then, like I said, the size of the space is so significant that now, as you heard in some earlier discussions, the DeFi, sector, this decentralized finance and all of its fascinating experimentation is exploring ways of using this significantly sized asset class, putting it to work, financial sort of transactions and others. Okay, let's see. So the question is then, what are the types of entities that are participating in this growing ecosystem? Well, there's a bunch of ways you can chop them up, that is, categorize them. But here's one way to think about it. There are, in what you might call our first pillar here, pillar one, there are entities that hold and transact in digital assets. Like what? Well, there's the investment managers that we spoke about and then that Adam mentioned. There's high frequency traders that have historically participated in equities and things like that, but are now doing so in this new asset class. There's a number of types of players in that category. But then if you think about the second category, you've got, and by the way, I guess examples of the first would be things like MicroStrategy, which have taken on significant positions in the space. Second category, entities that hold or facilitate trading of digital assets on behalf of customers. So of course, this is where your exchanges and your custodians and your broker dealers and others fall. Significantly sized fintech companies like Square and PayPal have also entered this space and are now offering solutions to their customers. The third category that you can think about, companies that operate in this space are those that actually create the digital assets for sale or distribution. So in the beginning, we were only thinking about ICOs, but now that's really broadened and matured to think about, the sort of assets that can be backed like this. So think about stable coins in all of their varied forms. That is, tokens represent the blockchain that are backed by things that have stable value, like currencies of sovereign nation, that's going to be more stable than, say, some of the cryptocurrencies that are out there. What's the process for creating those? Circle is an example of a company that issues and maintains USDC, and of course there are others coming down the pipeline. You've heard of Diem and DCEP and that such. This fourth category is a bit of a catch-all, and it describes entities that use blockchain-based business models in the ecosystem. So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about miners, right? That perform the important proof of work backbone or foundation of validating transactions for the public blockchains that serve so many functions. Now, of course, there's proof of stake. So staking enterprises, right, that will allow you to stake your assets on your behalf. Wallet providers, there's a great variety of companies in this space that we need to track. The last category is really more familiar, traditional entities that operate or participate in blockchain processes. And so those are entities like Coca-Cola that have decided to, use the blockchain or baseline to fulfill some of its processes. Microsoft, which was discussed earlier around royalties payment tracking. They're traditional banks is a category that has really entered the space recently. That is, some of the global financial custodians, banks that are more regional, finally looking to enter the blockchain space. JP Morgan, for instance, with JP Morgan Coin, figuring out how they integrate their legacy systems and personnel with these new solutions. So I took you through that list of types of entities in the world that are using blockchain technology, because when you're looking at those entities, the blockchain doesn't do everything itself. Each of these companies that participate have people and hardware and corporate structures that have to be in compliance with their jurisdictions and regulations, right? And so when you're looking at that, then there's a variety of risks that you need to think about to go through. So for instance, how do you audit these platforms that transact on blockchains, whether it's with cryptocurrencies or other types of assets? Key management, private keys, those are sort of the keys to the kingdom when it comes to digital assets. How do you manage that? Or do you use some new solution like multi-party computation? Cybersecurity risk, what sort of penetration testing have we done around companies in this space? Illicit activity, something to be monitoring very carefully. So forensics come in and help analyze. As an example, suppose you're an exchange in this space and someone deposits fiat currency onto your platform and then decides to use that to buy and then withdraw digital assets. So they get the digital assets, but in the meantime, they cancel the bank wire to the platform. And so end up with both, fraudulently end up with both the cash and the coin. Well, that's fraud. If you want to operate in the space, how do you design your systems in a way that protect against that, right? Very important. Tokenization. When we talk about tokens that are backed by other assets, how do you know they're backed by assets? What are we talking about? Are we talking about fiat? Are we talking about other cryptocurrencies? Are we talking about commodities like gold? There needs to be some process in place to make sure that those are actually properly covered. Smart contracts. It's one thing to have a blockchain design and functioning the way it's supposed to, but smart contracts are entirely new level. And so there's really just quite a long list of risks to go through here that need to be addressed. How do we do that? EY is certainly not the only shop out there that provides assurance in this space, but I think you'll find that we do one of the best jobs at it. Why? You've got to be able to invest in these services and make sure that you can deliver them in a way that's well informed by that technology. So how do we use assurance to reduce the risk? Well, there's financial statement audits here at the top. That's easy to see. Sometimes shops are not ready for an audit, especially with a lot of visibility. So we can help them get ready for that audit by a variety of audit readiness engagement or work. Internal audit, that's a very important role in companies, especially as they scale. So both to have that, the various lines of defense, we can help with setting that up and actually performing it. Not to take you through every single one of these because I know we only have so much time, but internal controls is absolutely critical to participate in the blockchain space. SOC reports are just examples of reports that cover internal controls around financial reporting, around cybersecurity, other types of trust principles. We can help deliver those reports from an audit perspective. We can also help them get ready for that. Attestation. How do you know that the blockchain is connected to the assets in the real world or other types of assets it's connected to? You can have periodic attestation. That is a third party like EY or others to come in and take a look at the blockchain, take a look at the real world assets, and then provide that assurance that there is a match. Forensics, I mentioned that earlier, fraud investigations, right? Unfortunately, these things happen. Having the right tools to do that, Paul Brody at the very beginning mentioned how we have our Explorer and Visualizer as an example of something that was used by our own forensics practice to help map out what's going on in this space. I could keep going, but just to make sure we cover everything on the list, let's turn now to our tools. So it's one thing to have the services in place and have the people trained to execute those and to have the right clients that need those services in compliance with whatever boxes that they need to check. It's another thing to have the actual technical tools to make this all possible. So we, over several years, have invested in the development. Now, some of these are public facing and other of these are internal so that we can deliver these services. The blockchain analyzer for public networks, that's something that we use on our audits to reconcile to the blockchain. The analyzer for private networks, same thing for private blockchains. Smart contract and token review, discussed earlier, available on blockchain.ey.com that you can use to assess these different assets. Board visualizer we mentioned earlier, and then sometimes we just need a variety of tools that are bespoke for our clients. Digital signature validation sounds pretty technical, but required to illustrate control of private keys in this space. Address generator to track where these things are on the blockchain. I could really go on and on, and I'd like to, but I'm trying to track sort of make sure that we're covering all this stuff. So, Jimmy, how much more time do you think I have?
Hi, David. You will have, I believe John is tracking the time, so you will get a pink 5 minutes more.
Great, wonderful. Well, let me just supplement with a few of the items that I wasn't able to get to that I think it's important for you to learn. Appreciate the tracking. Right now, in this space, like we said at the beginning, there's quite a bit of adoption, right, and participation by market players. Some of those players are of significant size, and some of them are the startups that have really developed this activity in the first place. And so, not surprisingly, we're seeing quite a bit of M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions. And so, to make that possible, for companies to be able to evaluate whether or not they should partner or subcontract or acquire another company in this space, they sometimes need others to come in and do some due diligence around that proposed transaction. That's something that we've been spending an awful lot of time doing recently. It needs assurance. So, for instance, if it's a custodian or it's an exchange or it's a networking platform that's going to connect many other companies, what's needed is a variety of resources to come in and provide some due diligence. Are there digital assets on their balance sheet that need verification? Are there people and technical tools, IP that is valuable that needs to be reviewed? This is definitely a key area that we have helped support the industry on. AML KYC. When you think about assurance, you think about compliance. One thing that regulators have been focused on keenly is making sure that the customers of these platforms are properly identified, so that you know whether you have to be interacting with a legal entity or an individual, and not someone that, say, law enforcement or other regulators have prohibited you from doing so. So AML KYC, that's anti-money laundering, know your customer. Those are areas that what we've done to help companies in this space is we've been able to come in and help assess what is their policy, and even help design that and implement that, if that's where we're talking about. You might ask yourself, well, isn't that something that's been around for a long time for banks and others? Absolutely. But what's unique about this ecosystem is that the blockchain comes in many forms. It comes in forms that are quite public, open, decentralized. There aren't any necessarily rules of admission, right? Anyone can participate in a variety of ways. And so it's just heightened the need to be able to have a framework in place that provides the proper level of verification of who it is that you're really working with. Happily, I've got another couple of minutes here. So there was a couple other items that I wanted to cover off here. especially on the risk side, that we can help mitigate on. When you think about the risks in this space, you think about how public blockchains are governed. Well, very decentralized. How are private blockchains governed? Well, in a much more centralized fashion. How about the smart contracts that that are native to certain public blockchains? How are they governed? This takes governance at the technical level. It takes governance at the people level, at the corporate level, and in many cases at a sort of a non-for-profit foundation level. So what we've been able to do for governance is, one, understand how these protocols work. Often you can use tokens to vote on whether certain proposals should be accepted. And you can also need real people that sit on a board to help vote on these foundations for how things roll out. We've helped organizations of a variety of sizes, mature and work in an efficient governance model, but in a very decentralized fashion. Thanks again, Jimmy, for letting me know that I'd be tracked on time. How are we doing?
I believe we are coming on time soon. Victor, maybe we can stand by the next speaker, which is the panel discussion to be hosted by David Sohn. So David, if you are ready, would you like to just come online as well?
Hello, everybody. David.
Hello, David.
Hi, Jimmy.
Take it away, David.
Sure. So for this session, the rise of digital assets, Mark Wyman, the EY partner, is going to be the moderator. So it's all yours, Mark.
Thank you, David, and thanks for setting the scene. I think we've got a lot of good color on what's going on in the ecosystem. So thanks for joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about the rise of the digital assets ecosystem this morning. My name is Mark Whiteman. I'm a partner based in Singapore, and I look after our wealth and asset management consulting business for APAC. The reason I'm with you today is probably over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a lot of conversations around, really how the ecosystem evolves, and a lot of this is with the private banks, the institutional investors, the intermediaries, the regulators, and the SMEs, and we really do see this coming together here in Asia, because of course you've got the transparency from a regulatory perspective. So I'm delighted to be with you today, and really we're gonna have hear from some experts in the industry, so we're gonna make this a little more real. So I'm joined by Daniel Lee, who's the head of digital exchange at DBS, Wade Zhou, who's joining us from Binance, where he's the CFO, and David, who's obviously our lead in EY's Blockchain Center of Excellence. So perhaps just to frame things, I can ask you to introduce yourselves, touching a little bit on your background and your role within the digital assets ecosystem. So perhaps, Daniel, we can start with you for a quick intro.
Hi, I'm from the DBS Digital Exchange. I'm looking after the business aspect of the exchange, and also listings for the exchange.
Thanks, Daniel. Wade, over to you.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me at the conference. My name is Wade Zhou. I work for Binance, where I'm in charge of pretty much all investments and M&A. And then Binance, for those of you who don't know, is the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world in terms of users and trading volume. And then what we look to do is basically hope to build up the cryptocurrency ecosystem on a global basis, because we believe in sort of the freedom that it delivers for both users in terms of as well as, I think, now looking at it for institutional capital in terms of as not just an investment, but actually as potential sort of other type of use cases that really revolutionize how we think about and use money.
Fantastic, thanks, Wade. And David.
Hi everybody, this is David Sohn. I'm a part of Blockchain Center of Excellence supporting APAC area. So I support the engagements for the crypto or blockchain related clients and prospects within the firm.
Fantastic. So let's get going, and let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing, hearing, and doing right now. Now, clearly, if you turn on the news, everybody is following the price of Bitcoin. Clearly, the ups, the downs, the volatility, and we're also hearing a lot more about institutional money moving into the marketplace. And there's no doubt that's exactly what we're seeing. You guys are at the forefront of the market, and obviously you're facing various different types of market players in the ecosystem. So perhaps, Daniel, starting with you. I mean, you're at DBS, largest bank here in ASEAN. You've already got this large network of institutional clients. You've got the accredited investors. The industry really took note, I think, when you guys announced that you were launching your own digital exchange covering the custody, the primary, the secondary sort of market tokenization, as well as crypto to fiat. So what's your view on tokenization of financial products, and what's going to drive your success with this new venture?
I think one of the main thing is that the interest of institutions coming to this space, right? That they're looking for other use cases besides just trading cryptos. And they have started to see that by using blockchain technology and stuff like that, there's a lot more opportunity for them to do cash raising rather than doing the alternative way of the traditional way of cash raising. Like for example, traditional IPO can take a long time. It can take at least a year of prep work, or a complex one might even take 2 years, right? It's possible to do a private equity listing within maybe 6 to 9 months, but that could actually, one of the main problems is the secondary liquidity of private equity, right? So I think that with security tokens and tokenization of assets, it try to marry the two worlds together, right? So you have the secondary trading from the traditional public markets and stuff like that. You may see some when you come up with an STO market. Plus, you'll be able to have the faster time to market without, let's say, issuing a prospectus, because you are actually only placing to institutional and accredited investors. Right? So I think basically allows you can think of it like making private equity a lot more liquid, a lot more tradable, and easier to transact. And I think it also allows you to trade it in smaller pieces as well. So, because in the past, in order for you to do a transaction, you need to do a lot of paperwork, S&P, legal work, and that would actually it doesn't make sense if you are doing small chunks of it.
Great, you're painting a very compelling picture there. So Wei, I mean, clearly you're over at Binance. From very humble beginnings, as you said, you're one of the largest players in the world now in the crypto space. Clearly, in the industry, a few years ago, there were conversations all about crypto. We moved to blockchain. We're back to crypto, particularly around Bitcoin and Ether. How do you see the sort of the market demand? How is it different this time around, and how do you see things evolving?
I think one thing that's sort of constant about the crypto industry is that it's always changing. I think it's like never a dull day in the crypto industry, as we call it. And the sentiment swings, always 5 standard deviations from where sort of the norm is, right? I think just Bitcoin price, if anything, it's like 10x swing in 1 year, right? I think that's sort of that's extremely sort of But I think for a lot of people that's actually learning about Bitcoin for the first time, and then I think that fundamental interest vis-a-vis sort of the pure speculative interest from back in second half of 2017 is a huge difference. And what we're seeing right now, maybe less so in Asia, but more so sort of, I would say, in North America and more I would say, advanced, smart money, even Wall Street money, if you look at it, is they're actually looking at Bitcoin to become of their corporate treasury reserve, right? Sort of like the get off zero sort of sentiment that's sort of going on right now. You have companies in the U.S. You actually have not just companies. Not only do you have sort of funds and endowments looking at it, but you actually have companies, actually NASDAQ, NYC listed companies looking to allocate 1% of their AUM, 1% of their treasury into Bitcoin as a hedge against sort of the inflation that is coming from central banks printing. I think that fundamental understanding of what Bitcoin is, that knowledge of it is far greater today than I think it was sort of, back then. And I think that's sort of, I would say, the first comment in terms of, what is cryptocurrency. And sort of the second bit is sort of like once you learn more about what Bitcoin is and what it represents, you sort of be like, well, it has its own shortcomings, right? It's not, it's slow, it takes, it's kind of bulky, you can't really develop on top of it. I mean, if then you sort of, go down the rabbit hole to be like, what are other offerings within sort of the cryptocurrency space, based on, blockchain technology that you can use, right? What other blockchains are there that can solve for some of the, default settings or some of the bugs that some people see in Bitcoin and criticize it for. So I think that is when sort of once that sort of thinking starts, then you start exploring, other types of crypto assets. And I think that's where sort of the real interest then becomes sort of, becomes greater. Right. So once you take, like in Matrix, once you take that red pill, then you start exploring and then discovering new things that you thought was like that in the traditional financial world, things have been the way they are forever now. But now you're like, I can think differently. Right. And people are actually doing that. Right. You have entrepreneurs going out there, launching different projects and building on top of the variety of chains that you see now with Ethereum. Right. Which has actually, increased in valuation as well, mainly because it's sort of like it is the application or there are probably the largest number of applications being built on Ethereum now, depending on through sort of like a variety of use cases, right? So that's sort of like an evolution of sort of like that's the application layer then that basically Bitcoin lacked, but don't discount Bitcoin for what it is. Don't discount for Bitcoin for what it's not, because it's just by being what it is already something that is wonderful.
Fantastic. So we've got increasing education, institutional players coming in and beyond Bitcoin, for want of a better term. Okay, and David, finally, in terms of market observation, clearly you're helping a lot of EY's clients across the firm. How do you see the market evolving and sort of developing?
Sure, Mark. So EY is professional services firm. So we face the market. So we are, meeting with a lot of industry players in the marketplace. And we are definitely seeing a lot of traction in the marketplace. And I believe that is because a lot of things in the regulatory scene is becoming more clear. And also a lot of different things in terms of the compliance requirements are getting improved. So more clients are coming to us for different services like, risk related or audit, assurance related or tax related, you name it. So we are seeing a lot of traction within the marketplace.
So increasing need for services to provide comfort. Okay, so let's talk about the big one. I mean, regulation. Clearly, there's been challenges. I think there's still a lot of questions, particularly around AML and the like. So Wei, let's start with you. I mean, clearly, finance operates in many countries. You've already talked about a bit of an Asian perspective versus the US. You must, as a firm, have contact with obviously many regulators around the world. What do you see as the major challenges that you have coped with, and equally, what do you feel that's still needed to help this this marketplace mature?
Yeah, I mean, so sort of, when you operate any business, you want two things. You want both clarity on what the laws are, and so that's transparency. You want transparency and clarity, and you also want certainty in terms of like what I am doing today will be the same. I can do that. When I make investments in sort of both infrastructure, people, and sort of policies and procedures and stuff, that same set of tools that I'm using to run my business today will be, is going to be the same in 5 years, right? And that is not the case for our industry. So it is extremely challenging. Not only are the laws and regulations in different parts of the world, vary from, left and right, 180 degrees in terms of difference. They're also not constant in that they're constantly either being updated, changed, abolished, banned, unbanned. So it just sort of, there's just a variety of tools. And just take India, for example, right? Like, India, 5 years ago had a really active, actually, cryptocurrency trading market. One of the leading local players, Unicoin, was doing about $300 million a day in fiat to Bitcoin trading. Then sort of the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, they banned, all fiat trading. So there's effectively a ban. So a lot of the sort of but Bitcoin survived. P2P players in India sort of thrived, and we invested in a company there in India sort of because we really liked the team and sort of we liked the fundamental value that Bitcoin and crypto provided for the Indian market. And in March last year, the Supreme Court sort of reversed the RBI ban on sort of banks. So banks now can allow for, INR to Bitcoin trading. But now you have the parliament in India coming out with a bill now potentially wanting to ban the quotation private cryptocurrencies. Well, what is a private cryptocurrency, right? So sort of now it's back. So sort of just doing business, and that's just one, I would say, spectrum of things, right? So for us, how we regulate it is basically, a couple of things, right? There's sort of obviously sort of, we are a very user-driven sort of organization. Sort of obviously, any financial organization that you take in users' assets, you basically have fundamental fiduciary duties in terms of protecting your users' assets, right? So that's principle number one. Principle number two, we do not want criminals to leverage our platform to basically, to do money laundering. So we obviously have to work with the variety of regulators in pretty much every jurisdiction that we're in to sort of, to follow the AML regulations and to follow the, anti, CTF or CFTF sort of, right, sort of rules and regulations. Those are sort of like the fundamentals, right? And then you sort of go into sort of the more advanced type of trading products. And obviously some of these are licensed products in certain jurisdictions, and certain jurisdictions are not licensed products. So we have to be extremely careful about the solicitation and the marketing of these products, as well as sort of, a variety of rules. So at the end of the day, as an organization, it's basically, it goes back to sort of, users and, vote with their feet, right? If they trust you, they will send their assets to you and then, trade on your platform, right? If they think it's a fair platform where, and then they can get their money back. So sort of one of the hardest things for any company, any startup to do is basically, how do you get users to trust that to send money to you, to trade on your platform, to make money, lose money, whatever. But when they want their money back, they get it back in a timely manner, in a transparent manner, right? And that's where the beauty of the blockchain is, right? And this is where we've been trying to work and educate sort of regulators and policymakers now, just be like, well, blockchain is transparent, right? Every single transaction is recorded, right? Either with, so sort of that fundamental nature is that all of this can be tracked, right? So we, in Binance itself, we work with a lot of these sort of on-chain analytics companies that sort of that where they store a lot of the addresses, and they have that database of it sort of to fundamentally solve sort of one of the biggest, I would say, claims or misconceptions about Bitcoin and about crypto is that it's being used for illicit activities. Well, if it's all tracked, then fundamentally, you can actually, within our platform, there's a lot of data that we have on what the addresses are, what devices they're on, these variety of things. And this big data sort of analytics, fundamentally, I think will solve, pretty much most of the questions and that sort of regulators have. So coming back to what we want to see from a regulations perspective. And I think, in Asia, maybe to a certain degree, it's ahead of the game, and maybe to a certain degree, it's behind the game. Most of the countries in Asia have a single regulator, like the banking regulator, the security regulator, and the market regulator are all sort of similar or one entities, vis-a-vis sort of like the US, where you have security regulators, banking regulators, and state regulators. So there's like just a variety of things, and it's just a very difficult market, I think, for newcomers to sort of navigate. So from our perspective, we've been, just try to be as transparent as we can be with how we do business, number one, and number two, always sort of put user first in terms of protecting the protection of consumers. I think so. Sort of these are fundamental principles that we apply, and then and we just deal with laws as they get passed and unpassed.
Thanks, Wei. And I think, you highlighted getting trust. Trust is still fundamental. Whilst the underlying technology blockchain is transparent, we still have some challenges around trust in the industry. And I think we'll come back to that one a little bit later on. So Daniel, perhaps moving to you, and clearly you recently announced the launch of your crypto exchange and STO platform. I understand you may still be waiting for the final PSA, but what to you has been the challenge from a regulation and compliance perspective, and equally, what else could be done potentially to make your life a little bit easier as you sort of set up and grow this business? Daniel, you might be on mute. Daniel? Okay. I'm afraid we can't hear you at the moment, Daniel. Not sure what's going on there. I'll come. Okay, maybe there's definitely a problem with the microphone. Okay, maybe you can have a quick look at that one, and I'll just pivot quickly to David, where we hopefully try and get Daniel back to hear his viewpoint. David, sticking with the theme around regulation, what do you see? I mean, clearly you're interacting with a lot of the regulators as well. I mean, what do you say is or perceive as sort of most needed from a regulation and compliance perspective?
Sure. You know, the crypto or digital asset in general is a new asset. It's a new asset class that we didn't have before. So for those products and services or businesses on a public blockchain, we need the right regulation, right? So we could easily make a mistake of applying what we had before and trying to apply existing framework for other type of asset classes to the crypto or digital asset on a public blockchain. So in order for us to come up with the right regulation, you know, the regulators really need to spend time and try to study about the nature of this new asset class, and then also how it's issued, maintained, and secured, how it's transacted on a public blockchain. So with all of this understanding, like hearing from the industry players and then, you know, the business owners, they really need to, you know, try to come up with the right regulation for the industry. So for example, you know, recently, some of the examples where I see some of these efforts are being made, you know, OCC in the US, the regulator for the banking industry, they recently made a statement that, you know, banks can, you know, use a public blockchain, run a node, and then use a stablecoin to settle transactions, which tells me, you know, they're really putting an effort to understand the industry and then what is value proposition, how the public blockchain can be used in the industry, and trying to come up with the right regulation. You know, there are other examples, but, you know, I'll just stop there. So yeah, I do think like we need a right regulation instead of just trying to apply what we had before, we can only do that by really understanding the nature of the asset class and then, you know, what shape and form it is being, you know, utilized on the public blockchain.
Thanks, David. I'll go back to Daniel now. Hopefully,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
you're back.
okay, excellent.
Fantastic.
Okay. No, earlier I was saying is that the license we are waiting for is actually the RMO, the Recognized Market Operator license for the STO. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, some of the things that we would always like is, you know, as Pedro has talked about, is regulatory clarity. Right. And I think at this point in time, it's as clear as we get in Singapore. Right? So at least I think that we have enough information to actually come up with a governance framework that actually allowed us to operate in a more secure manner than what we would have been like a couple of years ago. I think the FATF guidelines played a big part as well. I mean, of course, there's a lot of things that we need to iron out, you know, how you actually implement the travel rules and stuff like that. But yes, since our exchange has been actually set up to be a B2B exchange where we have different members, we are actually receiving coins from other other virtual asset service providers as opposed to private wallets. So based on that, we don't have as much of a problem as receiving it from private wallets. But you know, I can see those kind of issues that we need to, because like we also have accredited investors at our private bank side that would need to transfer coins over and stuff like that. So those are things that we hope that we will get more clarity from regulations. And I believe that as technology improves as well, it will make things a lot easier in terms of screening, and you'll be a lot more efficient, because currently I think that we are being very extra careful, and the amount of screening that we do is very thorough, but it's a bit time consuming. But I think with time, that would become a lot more efficient, and then we would be able to see, transfer in, out, and etc. In a more efficient manner, yet following all the required regulations.
Okay. And perhaps, I mean, I think that's very useful insight. And we sort of see regulation's a big area. Clearly, the other area we really need to touch on is the operational world of things. Let's face it, blockchain is still fairly new technology. People are still getting their heads around, not just around the educational side, but the operational, and the practical way of running a business in a compliant manner. So perhaps, Daniel, just staying with you. I mean, clearly you're part of the biggest bank here in ASEAN. You're used to running a sort of traditional business. What have been the operational challenges you've seen? Not so much the regulatory side. In terms of getting a digital assets business up and running. You've touched a little bit on the screening, the relative efficiency of some of these other aspects. But are there any other areas that really have been either a little more troubling than normal, or just areas that you'd call out to the audience in terms of lessons learned?
I think, as some of the teething issue we have is about, we talk about the very detailed screening that we do. So some of the guys that actually do transfer into us will start they'll see a much longer delay versus what they're usually used to before their asset become available. So those are the kind of things that sometimes that we have to educate them as well about our process and why we need to why we need to do what we need to do, kind of things to meet those requirements. And I think that the clients also begin to understand that. But of course, we are always working with the client to make the process a lot more efficient. We are whitelisting their wallets to do the transfers a lot more efficiently. So those are things that we are working with, and then working with third-party market makers also is generally quite new to the bank as well. So it's a lot of part on my work, being an evangelist to our risk managers and compliance to help them understand how the market makers work, etc. So there's a lot of selling internally on my part as well, to get the buy-in from the risk managers and the compliance officers, the operational risk guys, and also the guys who do the screening, the financial crime guys, etc.
Okay, so I think the key point there for the audience is we need a crypto or digital assets evangelist in your firm if you're going to take these businesses forward. And then David, again, just coming from, this panel is talking about the rise of digital assets within the theme of trust and transparency. How do you see clients providing comfort? Because we talked about the need for education. We talked, that comes through a lot. But what about the comfort factor? Building on some of Wei's comments around the necessity for trust and transparency in here.
Right. So if you're dealing with a crypto asset or a digital asset on a blockchain, you could be exposed to a series of new operational risk. Simply because it is something new, run on as a blockchain, a new infrastructure. So, for instance, taking crypto as an example, it's a bearer asset, so which is controlled by private keys. So key management becomes really important. So entities who are dealing with your asset or processing your financial information regarding the asset, crypto asset or digital asset in general. They need to have all good processes and controls in place to mitigate all of this operational risk. There is a way of, in a traditional marketplace, there is a way of showing that to the customers and then users of the services, which is they can hire independent auditor like us and then get a SOC report issued. So that could be an example. So I do believe for the market to mature and then make it really healthy, trusted, transparent marketplace, I think the market players need to make some more investments and then try to differentiate themselves from others by issuing this type of reports, and then really try to make them seen as trusted and transparent organizations.
So I can see I've got the 2 minutes left warning. So David's just giving some comments. Let me think about how best to close it. You know, we're talking here about trust and transparency in the industry. So perhaps starting with Daniel again, you know, 1 minute or less on, you know, from your perspective, what's going to be, you know, the best bang for a buck? How are we going to build maturity, trust, transparency, you know, so we get it, so we co-create this sustainable digital assets ecosystem? What do we need to do, Daniel?
Well, I think, like, you know, our vision is that we can create sort of an ecosystem that's more, you know, it's like a secure place for all the financial institutions to operate in a very regulated environment. So hopefully with that kind of ecosystem, it does bring a lot of, like, you know, a very more regulated landscape into this into this space. I mean, that is what we hope to be able to build, and then we'll attract different financial institutions to then provide that service to their end clients. Then.
Fantastic. Wei, from your perspective, what else is, what's going to be the, you know, the best way to, you know, build that trust and transparency?
I think for Binance, at least for us, the way we think about it is actually it's just repetition. Like anytime, because we're a you know, at the end of the day, we are a startup within the blockchain space. We're also a startup in the fintech space, and then, you know, but compared to like the traditional financial world, we're like, you know, like a 3-month-old baby, right? And the only way to sort of build trust within that sort of ecosystem is just through repetition, right? Because like, you know, people are used to what they are used to, right? We've been trained to work, you know, to place our money in a bank, you know, from the day we were born, right? You know, start with a piggy bank, even that has the word bank in it, right? So the only way to do that is just, you know, like, it just, like, for us, is just sort of like, you know, like, get users in to try it. If they like it, they'll come back, right? And I think that's sort of the fundamental of how you sort of do business, right? And how the fundamental is sort of like, you know, finance 101, right? When like, if you think about what's going on, it's like a bank gets in trouble when people can't get their money out. When you know, so sort of that issue, you know, has always been the case, right? So for us, it's just to sort of, you know, have people to work with you, compete, or in this way. I think the only difference in this case is that, you know, everything is digital, right? So that repetition takes place in the virtual format. And going back to what you guys said is sort of, you know, and then a lot of it is creating that trust in terms of, you know, people using our platform, at least, you know, for their, you know, cryptocurrency needs.
Mark, sorry, sorry. Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to give one more comment. I think one important thing is for the regulators and the market to be educated about this space, right? So, in my experience, you know, like 2 years ago, when most of the people I spoke to, they're very skeptical. They don't trust this space and stuff like that. And you know, I was spending like 2 years preaching about this, right, internally, and even to partners that have signed NDA with us. And you know, the product doesn't change, right? But now they begin to trust that same crypto product a lot more because they understand it. So I think that, you know, it's important for us who already know it to educate the whole market, because there are still a lot of people that are very ignorant about this part.
Fantastic. Great closing comments. Thank you very much, David, Wei, and Daniel. Clearly, education, trust, and find yourself an evangelist are some of the key solutions going forward. Thank you very much for your time. Let me pass back to Jimmy and Victor for the next section. Thank you once again.
Hey, thanks, Mark, David, Daniel, and Wei. Over to you, Scott, for the managing risk.
Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, just getting the screen sharing going there. Welcome everyone to this thought leadership session, where we're going to be covering with you our views around risk management, and some great some teasers there in that last session we just had with the panel to get us warmed up, and really focusing on enterprise blockchain projects. We will touch on digital assets too, because we believe for enterprise blockchain projects to really achieve the true value, digital assets will be part of that. My name is Scott Waller. I'm the Oceania blockchain leader. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Jinyi Wang, who's a blockchain assurance specialist. and you'll hear from Xinyi a little later on. And I just want to start by outlining a bit of a paradox, because, and I think we've heard this throughout the session today, that blockchain by its very definition should engender trust. We talk about a trustless system, but in reality, as we've just heard from the panelists, companies, as they get into this space, are confronting trust issues at nearly every turn. And one of the drivers of that, those trust issues really come back to risk and managing risk, whether that's perception of risk or real risk. So today, what we're going to be covering through with you is we're going to start by having a look at an overview of why blockchain projects necessitate a more stringent approach to managing risk. Go through with you some examples where we've helped clients manage through risk. And then lastly, we'll show you one of the tools that we've developed in this space that will help you in prioritizing your risk efforts. So there's 4 things we want you to take away from the session today. Firstly, because blockchains move value around and digital assets, as we've heard, and not just information, there's a much higher impact for organizations if things go wrong. If you think about cybersecurity risks and data breaches, which we're all used to hearing about, the risk there is people can potentially use that information to cause harm and damage your brand. In the case of digital assets and blockchain, those perpetrators are right in the cookie jar from the get-go, right? So it's value out the door immediately. They've got the keys to the bank account. So the downside risk is significant. Secondly, to steal one of Paul's phrases, blockchains are a team sport. The technology that you implement in collaboration with others, and therefore stakeholder alignment and a shared view on risk appetite is really important. You need to have common understanding amongst those companies you're going into a shared network with on design principles. If one company is more sophisticated or has a higher understanding around the technology and how it works and the risks, and there's a less educated party within that ecosystem, they're going to be suspicious and hesitant around really embracing the upsides of the technology. So all parties need to follow at a similar pace. Thirdly, as we know with all software testing, if you leave things to the last minute in terms of reviews, audits, testing, the regret costs associated with that are going to be significant, and it's no different in this space. What we've seen in the past is a lot of these regulation and compliance considerations have been left too long in the piece, which leads to a lot of delays and regret. And finally, considering aligning your efforts in the risk management space to industry standards is really important to maximize the value and the marketability of your blockchain solutions. This is not just best practice. There is actually opportunity for brand and market differentiation when it comes to procuring risk management services and how you can market those to differentiate what you're doing. So we've all seen the headlines, and particularly at the moment with the price of crypto at all-time high, the stories around individuals having less than robust processes when it comes to managing their own private keys and their own private digital assets. And with the rise of DeFi in 2020, growing to a significant market cap of some $20 billion being stored in those contracts, we also saw more news stories around hackers who were targeting those funds held in those contracts. And of course, people lost money, unfortunately. And as we were referring to earlier, that's why due diligence around these products is really critical. These DeFi contracts and smart contract objects are really honeypots for perpetrators. There's extreme motivation around attacking and breaching those contracts because of the value that's stored in them. And ultimately, if we remember, these DeFi contracts are really nothing more than code sitting out there, on the public domain for all to see and try and break. And so really, as more institutional organizations come in and start to think about how they can interact with these digital assets and this decentralized finance, we are going to see, and we're already starting to see, a maturing of services in the market, whether that be on the custodial side, whether that be around governance, whether that be around code testing and deployment. We're seeing a great uplift in really securing these products such that institutional players can come in and use them with confidence. And the same is true in the enterprise space as it is in the digital asset space. There's the risk appetite for enterprise is quite different from that of the consumer and what they may be willing to accept. A listed company is just not going to accept that things are left to chance when it comes to putting their data and any digital assets, digital twins through a blockchain. They're going to want assurances around how keys are managed, what protocol risks are being managed, how privacy is managed, regulatory risk, a lot of the things we've already heard David and our panel talk about. And these questions are going to be asked from the top. They're going to be asked from risk committees and boards and audit committees, and they're going to want evidence. They're not just going to trust what you say, they're going to want an independent party to confirm that those risks have been managed. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of these conversations or a lot of the engagement with the bodies that I've mentioned left it too late in the project. Just before go live, the risk committee might get involved and suddenly, there's a laundry list of items that need to be worked through that delays projects for 6 to 12 months. So that really leads us on to, well, what's the right timing for thinking about risk management? As we've talked about, blockchain is still an emerging technology. There are risks by its inherent nature of being an emerging technology. And I think when we look in the enterprise, enterprises have risk management baked into the organization structure and the processes, and they have lines of defense. However, often what we've seen in the blockchain space and other emerging technology spaces is the projects get driven out of a innovation function or a commercial function. And sometimes the engagement that should be happening with other parts of the business, which are critical to actually commercializing a product, don't happen. So, finance isn't involved to think about, the financial audit impact, or internal audit is involved to think early enough around the internal control frameworks, or legal isn't involved to think around legal risks, or IT isn't involved to think around the cyber. So it's important that, just like you would any other project in the traditional tech stack, be involving those functions, that you do the same in blockchain. And I'd argue it's even more critical. Often, those traditional functions I've mentioned don't have the knowledge, so they may not have been involved in this technology or space before. And again, that's really why it's critical to bring them into projects early, so that they can start to get comfortable with these principles, and so that they can do a fit gap around, well, how does IT need to evolve its processes to actually support private key management if that's needed with these projects. We've just heard about the challenges in the legal and regulatory space. Those teams need to be brought in and start to get their heads around this early, so that these projects don't get shut down if those functions find out about projects at a later date. And I think, in the digital asset space, we are now starting to see a more proactive approach based on market expectations, and a realization that, if you are proactive, you are able to differentiate your product. So for instance, in the stablecoin world, Tether got a lot of criticism around some of the haphazard reserve account auditing that they did. And we now see other players coming in who, from the get-go, from the first listing, they have a very, repeatable and frequent and audit approach around that reserve listing. And those products have got a lot of traction with investors in the market. So a proactive approach really does pay off here. So despite that engagement, we still do very often hear from companies that there's a lack of risk appetite. It is probably one of the most common terms I hear when we are engaging with clients around enterprise blockchain projects is, is the upside, does it outweigh the downside? And I think a lot of the time the risks are very much perceived risks, and usually comes from a place of perhaps a lack of understanding around what the actual risks are versus what they read in mainstream media and people's perceptions. And this is critical again to the collaborative nature of blockchains, in the enterprise, because ultimately this is about, not just convincing your own organization, but convincing your suppliers and business partners and your business ecosystem. As Paul talked about in the keynote, this is, equivalent to an ERP journey, but across your supplier relations. And if anyone has been through an ERP journey and the change management that's required as part of that, you'll know change management and hearts and mind is as much as the battle as the technical. So it's really critical that those conversations happen early on, with those business ecosystem players, and they're not, left to the end. So despite some of the challenges, with both internal barriers, getting internal stakeholders educated, but also engaging your business partners and getting them bought in, we still see a very healthy growth curve. And again, you've seen probably some more updated data on, and we'll have some further data on this, as Paul mentioned, around May timeframe. I think it's fair to say we're on the same growth trajectory as what you see here. Actually pretty surprising, 60% of the world's largest companies are working on blockchain projects. However, if we look at how many of those projects are actually in production, 16%, is less heartening and maybe a bit deflating. But the reality is it's still an emerging technology, and a lot of companies are really still framing in their business context where this best fits, and starting to understand where it can add the most value. So what's interesting when you look at that 16% is to ask, well, what's the main reason that companies are not moving forward? So why aren't the 84% actually moving from a proof of concept or a pilot into something that they can actually rely upon and get value from? So here's the answer to that question. From our surveys, and admittedly this around public blockchains, but the same themes are true across the board. We can see that the majority of these issues relate to trust, as we've just been talking about in the panel on digital assets. The same is true on the enterprise blockchain space. Consistent themes around technology maturity, security, and privacy concerns. And again, while blockchain may be a new technology and still emerging, I think what we've seen through some of the major public blockchain networks like Bitcoin, which has been a resilient technology out there in the marketplace, operating on a global scale with very few actual core protocol network breaches over time, the technology is actually pretty stable. What we're talking about here, I think, when it comes to these issues, is really the maturity of processes, policy, governance, procedures, and regulation in the ecosystem that are not yet mature. And that's really driving a lot of these fear factors here. And I think even now, many executives are still unclear around what blockchain really is and how it applies in their business. And while they may have moved past, some of that public narrative that was going on around Bitcoin versus blockchain, I think people are now clear on that. It's still it's not a very tactile technology, right? Like when you think about other emerging technologies like, VR and drones and other things that are more tangible, blockchain's quite abstract. It's a protocol level technology. So there's much more work still needed in that space to really make these use cases tangible. Regulation. Look, we had a really good discussion on regulation in the last panel. which was great. But just reiterating, I think what we heard there, from a regulatory perspective, it's still a very murky playing field. Regulators are still trying to form their views. In a lot of cases, there is no regulation, so there's a regulation vacuum. In other cases, the regulation is swung in the opposite way and is quite heavy-handed and restrictive. And in the enterprise blockchain space, when key to managing that risk is really being aware of what regulation exists in what jurisdiction and which jurisdictions are leading and then likely to influence other jurisdictions who may be fast followers with similar views. There are, as we heard, very different regulatory perspectives out there, which make it challenging. If you're an enterprise who's looking to put out transaction flows cross-border, it's very easy to be caught out. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause at this point, and I am going to hand over to my colleague, Xinyi Wang, who's going to cover some case studies where we've helped our clients around risk management. Over to you, Xinyi.
Great, thanks, Scott. And hopefully these case studies can really help add some color and conceptualize what we've been talking about so far. So with this first case, the client was working with an Australian state mint to help create a digital token version of the physical gold that was being held in the mint's vaults. And the engagement really came about through the desires of both the client, who was looking to de-risk their platform, as well as the government, who was concerned about the supply side risk that more digital tokens could be created than actual gold that exists to back it. So EY was asked to come in and perform a risk and controls assessment over the blockchain platform. And this meant looking at the system design and the processes, in particular around the controls over the minting and burning, to make sure that there's always a one-to-one backing of token to asset. And at the conclusion of this engagement, EY produced a report that outlined all the different risks identified over anything that could potentially present an issue to the client's product, as well as what processes and controls the client already had in place to mitigate those risks, what risks were still missing a strategy for mitigation, and finally provided some recommendations for actually mitigating those. So with this second case study, this client operates within the supply chain space, and they had built a blockchain platform that replaced the use of paper-based documentation in the bulk commodity value chain. And that allowed users access to a single platform and a single source of information for all their transactions. And when EY was involved, the client was still in a proof of concept phase and was looking for a way to demonstrate to their potential investors and customers that the platform was reliable. And in particular, the issue they were facing was around how could they demonstrate to the relevant parties that A, the accuracy of the information captured within the platform matched the standard process and reflected the true data, and B, there's a lot of commercially sensitive information going through this platform. And most of the time, you don't want complete visibility of all data by all users. So can their platform properly ensure that different participants could see only the data that they were granted permission to see? So EY Assurance performed independent validation of the data that was captured in the platform and made sure that it matched the expected data, and then produced a report that documented the procedures that were performed. In addition to this report, EY Consulting also performed an independent value assessment of the client's platform and prepared a separate report that outlined the benefits of using such a platform. And so ultimately, the client was able to utilize both reports in conversations with potential investors and customers to differentiate themselves in the market. All right, so with our third case study here, this client is one who's disrupting the real estate industry with a tenancy contract management platform. So the platform utilizes smart contracts to really streamline the execution of contracts and rental payments between the real estate agent, the landlord, and the tenant. And the client knew that they were operating within a fairly regulated environment and that their platform would be relied on during trust account audits of their customers. So they wanted to take a proactive stance with the regulator and wanted to make sure that their concerns would be addressed early on while they were still designing and executing the platform. And this is because the regulation that governs trust accounts require that there's regular confirmation through compliance audits that the trust accounts are being managed appropriately. And the client knew that the client wanted to ensure that the availability to easily capture and evidence this sort of information would be built into their platform. So EY was brought in to perform a risk and controls assessment over the platform prior to the product launch. And this really helped make sure that any findings from EY's assessment was able to be included and addressed prior to the platform go live. And this led not only to an improved product, but also allowed the client to much more effectively deliver the trust account audit requirements in the platform and manage some of the regulatory risks related to operating within the real estate industry. Okay, so within the next 2 slides, we'll go over some more concrete ways in which organizations can manage risk. So on the first slide here, we've got some examples of best practice activities that organizations can perform internally. And not only are they good for internal risk management, they'll also set you up for success later on down the road with any external assurance services as well. So the first 3 activities here we've got are all somewhat related. So risk scoping and assessment, internal control frameworks, and documenting policies and procedures. They're all related to developing a systematic way of identifying and recording and assessing risks, and then making sure that there's adequate controls in place to help mitigate those risks and documenting them so that they're easy to repeat and replicate. With smart contract code reviews, we talked earlier about the value of stablecoin reserve audits, but this is looking at, is the actual technology behind them robust? Does the implementation of the smart contract actually match the business logic? Are there any potential security vulnerabilities? These are all things that need to be checked. And finally, within a governance framework, if this applies to you, information such as consensus model, any rules governing membership in a consortium, any legal and funding considerations, all of these should be documented as well. All right, so here we have the services that independent entities like EY are able to provide in helping organizations manage their risk. And I won't go into detail on all of these, but just focus on a couple of the particularly relevant ones. So in the middle left, we've got SOC reports, and David also mentioned SOC reports earlier in his keynote. So SOC reports have been used as really an industry standard approach for organizations who provide services to the customers to demonstrate that they're managing their risks effectively. So for example, SOC 2 reports, which are a type of SOC report, they cover things like security, confidentiality, availability, processing integrity, privacy over any sort of IT system. And for organizations deploying blockchain-enabled solutions in particular, maintaining that trust with customers is incredibly important because, like Scott already mentioned, we're operating within this emerging technology space. And in fact, we have been seeing more and more of SOC reports being used within the industry to help communicate to customers that the relevant internal controls are in place. So to the right of SOC reports, we've got digital asset attestations. This covers a variety of services, reserve account audits, You know, looking at the data that's captured within a supply chain platform and making sure that it reflects true data, like we spoke about in the second case study. A number of other services also fall under digital asset attestations. So what I hope we've managed to convey here is that there's a whole host of different options that organizations can use to help de-risk their products. And these can also play a big role in helping differentiate your product and improve stakeholder alignment and ultimately lead to a more successful project. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Scott to take us through a demo of the Blockchain Risk Navigator.
Thanks, Xinyi. Okay, so hopefully, you know, we've seen so far the importance of trust with users, stakeholders, regulators, suppliers, and partners in the ecosystem. And that's you know, it's easier said than done to do it in terms of really bringing trust to all those parties. And we recognise, you know, in an emerging area that it's sometimes difficult to see the wood for the trees. So what I want to quickly talk about now, I'm just conscious of time. We're not going to be able to give you the full demo of this, but I do want to give you a sneak peek and maybe you know, raise your curiosity. So what we've recognized is that companies need help here. And so we've created a tool. I'm just going to give you a very quick sneak peek of it. It's an assessment tool, and we use this currently with clients. It goes through a number of areas, you know, legal areas, business operations, technology risk, supplier risk. And what it aims to do is to really help navigate you at a high level around what the risks are for your particular blockchain project. And we then present that in a format that allows you to see the risk landscape and your maturity. So here you can see risks that have been managed in the yellow and what your total risk landscape looks like. You can then, you know, from there, you get a set of recommendations around how to address the risks that aren't currently covered. So this is an internal tool at the moment. It is our ambition to put it up on blockchain.ey.com and make this available to you, just like the smart contract testing tool is today. So watch this space. So I'm just going to wrap up now, and just a reminder, you know, back to the 4 takeaways that we covered at the beginning. So you know, remember we said that more so than on Web 1.0 and 2.0. Blockchains are really all about they're all about a system of trust. Sorry, my screen's going crazy here. They're all about a system of trust. So downside risks are significant because we're moving value around. Like anything new, it's not well understood, so education is key. You need to educate across your organization and your supplier base. To be successful, you also need to proactively manage the stakeholder perception and really bring along both internal and external. And then finally, the market perception of risk management will drive success of digital assets and can really differentiate you in the market. Thank you very much for your time and listening. And I'm now handing back to Victor, I believe, who's going to transition us to our wrap-up session.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Scott. Thanks, Xinyi. I'll just hand over to Jimmy, Adam, and David.
Thank you. Thanks, Victor. And thank you so much, Scott, Xinyi, for the session as well, for your thinking around risk. And I really like that little tool that you presented, Scott. I think it's simple, and I think the visualization makes it easy to analyze where are the areas of risk we need to watch out for as well. So we are down to our very last commentary and wrap up. It has been a fantastic morning. We have gone through quite a fair bit of things in the early morning, and in the second part covered through quite a fair bit around assurance, risk, and digital assets. I have joining me Adam, who is our APAC blockchain assurance leader, and David Hoffman, who is the co-founder of Bankless. Thanks for joining us here, David and Adam as well. So maybe perhaps let me start with Adam, just sharing a bit of your thoughts, please, on what you have heard from David Bird on our assurance strategy and why it's important to have that element in in elevating trust in blockchain ecosystems?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the key theme that we've heard throughout this the entire morning is around trust. So yeah, so David Bird picked up on this, as did the panel, and then of course in Scott and Cindy's session. With blockchain, we often hear about it being trustless. So it's quite interesting that we've talked so much about trust and why it's important, and why we need to manage the risks. I mean, trustless with relation to blockchain is really about the inherent nature of it, in the sense that it does not require trust between the two parties. But of course, blockchain doesn't solve every problem, and it doesn't exist in a vacuum. So it's important that we do consider the trust both within organizations, so things like cybersecurity, and how does the blockchain interact with other systems, and also in the wider ecosystem, so that the education level is where it needs to be, as Daniel pointed out in the panel, and having a regulatory environment which helps to enhance the credibility of the ecosystem. And as Wei also spoke about in the panel, it's important that regulatory system itself develops and gets to a more steady state to enable companies to make the investment decisions that they need to make.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And we have David here as well. David, you founded a channel called Bankless, right? And this topic on digital assets, digital currency is certainly something that you're pretty familiar with as well. Any thoughts from hearing the panel discussion on rise of digital assets?
Yeah. The rise of the world of digital assets, I think, is an interesting one when we juxtapose it to what we see going on here with enterprise blockchain. There's a certain level of privilege that native digital assets have due to their nativity, their crypto nativeness, right? The EY and enterprise blockchain is really going after the hard problems of blockchain development, which is stitching the real physical world into something that is internet native, whereas digital assets and native digital assets, tokens on Ethereum, don't have to worry about this level of complexity. And so one thing I've been thinking about while I've been listening to all the panelists here is how are these two worlds going to intersect and engage with each other? Because as we all know, one of the greatest things about Ethereum is that it's a common platform for all financial and economic activity. Yet some economic activity does not have the same characteristics as other economic activity. The digital native and the non-digital native are just categorically different types. And so that's the kind of where my attention has gone to during this conversation and this panel, and kind of something that I continually ponder about.
Yeah, thanks, David. And Adam, we heard from a financial services institution that has been around for a very long time and has been the dominant market leader as well. And we also heard from an upcoming startup as well that's very big in the crypto space. So how do you see the two might converge, or will they converge at all?
Is that to me?
Adam, you're on mute.
Adam.
I think this is part of the kind of evolution of the ecosystem, and it's a characteristic of how that ecosystem has been building up over the last few years. So yeah, I mean, there will be plenty of new entrants, and that's been a big feature of the digital assets market. But as the environment itself becomes more institutionalized, and there's bigger players wanting to invest in digital currencies and other digital assets, then yeah, I would expect there to be more existing companies and brands wanting to operate in this space.
Oh, Jimmy, you're also on mute.
Thanks for that, David. Yeah, the keyword of 2020 has come over to 2021 as well. I was saying Wei Zhou from Binance was saying, that one of the key thing about the cryptos is really convincing or assuring the people that when I get cryptos, when I buy the currencies and I wanted to convert it back to fiat, I get it settled very quickly, and I get an assurance that I get in a way that my money back. But how do you see this evolving, right? Will regulation help this? And will there be a stage even that we will see that where we hold tokens or cryptos, we treat it really like a medium of exchange, and not be too concerned about whether do I need to switch back to USD or SGD and so on.
Yeah, so the educational platform that I work on with my co-host Ryan is called Bankless, and we focus on living a financial life using these crypto native tools, which inherently biases us towards the crypto native. And so when you say that people might question the redeemability of a token on Ethereum, like is the token that I have actually connected to a real world asset?
Yep.
When you flip that on its head, it's actually to somebody who is like a crypto native or a bankless person, it's actually the inverse. Whereas the crypto asset is actually the more interesting and more assured asset versus the legacy counterpart, right? I have my dollars in Wells Fargo. I also have a PayPal account which has dollars in it, and I have all these integers on these different databases. Yet also there's those are all like PayPal dollars or Wells Fargo dollars. While those aren't all the same thing. And so I think there's actually a possibility to flip it on its head and say, to some degree, some crypto assets, not all crypto assets, but some crypto assets actually have stronger assurances about their bearer asset nature or their redeemability or their credit worthiness than some of these centralized database ledgers. And I think perhaps what we were seeing with this whole GameStop debacle, where Robinhood and their broker Citadel is actually perhaps like questionably insolvent. And that those dollars were perhaps not redeemable. And the transparency and, like I said, the crypto nativeness, I think, could actually offer stronger assurances in the long term for people that want those things. It just kind of takes like a cultural, a societal shift to really understand that and really believe that that's actually even true.
Absolutely. Well, we have come down to our last minute. David, Adam, it's been a great pleasure. Thanks for coming on for the summit as well. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everybody that's been part of the summit, all the speakers and panelists. A special shout out to the team as well that has made this happen, especially Victor and John Frechette and the rest of the team that has done a lot of work in the leading up to this as well. So maybe just one last point. We also have a global blockchain summit that's coming up sometime in May. Stay tuned for it because it will feature definitely a lineup of speakers and a lot more new things that we will be sharing as well. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us at the APEC Blockchain Summit, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks everybody.